Yeah, more or less. I mean, I can only...
turn everything over to us and you think.
Yeah, probably. I don't think anybody will read it.
Right. We're happy with it.
Oh, there are points where I'm having to damn cards. But apart from that, I'm transcribed.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Before we get started, hand it back over to the co-chairs. I just want to let people in the audience and those watching through the webcast that the period for comments from those in attendance today and online will be at 3:30. For those online, you can give comments and we're starting to receive them, so thank you through the website at the email of comments@taskforcepolicing.us. And for those in the audience, there's cards being passed around. If you could just, you don't have to write your comment on there, but if you could just put your name on there so I can call people, we will have microphones floating so that we can then come to you and you can make your comment. But that will be at 3:30. I just want to give people a heads up notice and so an opportunity to fill out the cards. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Robinson again, a co-chair of the task force, and delighted to welcome all of you to the afternoon session. We're now going into panel 4 of our witnesses from the civil rights, civil liberties community. We have 4 excellent witnesses with us this afternoon. I'll be introducing each of them in turn, and a reminder that their full bios are both online and in the handouts for those of you who are here with us in the audience. All of them are very accomplished, so reading their full bios again would take up a great deal of time, so I'll be introducing them very briefly. We'll be starting out with Sherilyn Eiffel, who is President and Director Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Sherilyn Eiffel, pleased to have you with us, and please begin.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation to address the task force. The NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund is the nation's oldest civil rights legal organization, and as a result, we've been engaged with the issue of excessive force and racial bias in policing since our inception 75 years ago. In fact, the 2013 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Devil in the Grove, details the work of Thurgood Marshall, our first director counsel, in leading efforts to challenge the shooting of unarmed African Americans in Florida in 1949. Last year, the longstanding problem of police abuse and excessive force in communities of color came to a head. The killings of Tamir Rice in Ohio, Akai Gurley in New York, John Crawford III in Ohio, Ezell Ford in California, Mike Brown in Missouri, Kajemi Powell in Missouri, and the assaults on Marlene Pinnock in California, Chris Lally in Minnesota, LeVar Jones in South Carolina, and many others, has finally captured the attention and outrage of Americans of all races. The fact that many of these encounters have been captured on cell phone or videos has played an important role in convincing many people of what we at the Legal Defense Fund have known for decades, that there is a real problem of racial bias in policing and violence against unarmed African Americans by police officers. Acknowledging this problem does not constitute an act of war or hostility toward the men and women of law enforcement. To demand an end to police brutality, to ineffective policing, to violence against unarmed and peaceful individuals is not to demonize the police. We recognize that policing is hard and dangerous work. The communities of people we represent need good policing, trustworthy police officers, and a relationship with police based on trust and respect. But in far too many communities and in far too many encounters with law enforcement, there's neither trust nor respect. We hold police officers to a higher standard than we impose on average citizens. That's because police officers are officers of the state with the sacred charge to protect and serve, and we, the people, give them a nightstick and pepper spray and a taser and a shield of honor and the power to take human life. And with these awesome weapons comes awesome responsibility. The horrific series of brutal incidents we've seen this year in which officers have killed unarmed African Americans is neither isolated nor new. It's deeply rooted in deficiencies in law enforcement policies, practices, accountability structures, training, and transparency, and reflects the reality of both explicit and implicit bias in policing. We have a moment to address this long-standing problem. We believe that if we take action now, we can improve policing standards and community confidence in law enforcement, increase safety in the community, and safety for police officers. We've already called upon the Department of Justice to use its authority and substantial resources to address the problem, and we will continue to engage with the Department of Justice on those issues. We also presented testimony before Congress calling for federal reforms specifically focused on the elimination of government-sponsored military-style equipment in public schools. We're happy to furnish this task force with that earlier testimony and those documents, and of course a more comprehensive version of the testimony I'm presenting today has already been furnished to the task force. We believe there are three critical elements that are urgently needed to address the crisis that we find ourselves in. One is the need for data and transparency. One of the most disturbing and truly astonishing dimensions of this problem is the absence of reliable data. We need a national, publicly available database that documents police shootings, assaults, and killings of unarmed individuals. Second is training and supervision. We believe that all policing, and certainly community policing by its very nature, must include training in how to confront and manage implicit racial bias, improve training in de-escalation techniques, improve training in managing encounters with youth and those who exhibit mental health concerns. But of course, training alone is insufficient. There must be proper supervision of officers who receive this training. And finally, there must be accountability for failure. Accountability for failing to apply the techniques provided in the training for use of excessive force and for killing innocents is an essential part of building trust with the community. The single biggest source of mistrust within the community as it relates to the system of law enforcement is the seeming impunity of officers who violate the law or take the life of unarmed citizens. And so we recommend also that prosecutors be brought into your discussion. They play a vital role in helping to improve policing and to building trust between law enforcement and communities. Finally, we believe that much of what we have proposed as relates to data collection, training, internal police standards for accountability is already required because we believe that this information and these standards are essential to fulfill the Department of Justice's obligations under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VI bars the provision of federal funds to any program that engages in discrimination. Each year, police jurisdictions around the country receive more than $500 million in federal grants through the Justice Assistance Grant Program and other programs. Proper stewardship of this program, in accordance with Title VI, requires that the Department of Justice satisfy itself that individual police departments operate free from discrimination. It is our hope that the reform measures outlined in this submission will prove useful to the task force as it engages in the critically important work of improving the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they protect and serve. And I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Excuse me, thank you so much. We're going to be holding questions until all of the witnesses have provided their testimony. Next, we're going to be hearing from Laura Murphy, longtime director of the Washington Legislative Office of the American Civil Liberties Union. Welcome.
Thank you.
Maybe switch over.
Thank you, Professor Robinson and Commissioner Ramsey. And we are grateful for the opportunity to testify. Let me start by saying something and make it really clear that even though the ACLU probably sues more police departments than any other organization, the ACLU absolutely supports all fair-minded, law-abiding, and courageous police officers who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. However, we can no longer ignore the real crises that brought us here today. In some communities, there's a deep distrust and lack of faith in law enforcement. Just go a few miles over to Anacostia, and people will tell you about overzealous arrests for nonviolent offenses and the use of excessive and deadly force. And these tactics have been used against children as well as against persons with psychiatric disabilities. In New York City, 50% of those stopped and frisked are African American. In Maricopa County, Arizona, Latino drivers are 9 times more likely to be stopped than whites. Right here in the nation's capital, 91% of those arrested for marijuana possession are black, and we know usage rates are about the same. In Florida, where black students make up 21% of the youth population, they comprise 46% of all referrals to law enforcement. This data helps explain why criminal justice reform is one of the most important civil rights issues of the 21st century. The ACLU has 5 recommendations for change, some of which police departments have already adopted, and every police department could adopt today. And let me say, I agree with all of the recommendations that Sherilyn Ifill has made. Our first recommendation is to end the unconstitutional and dehumanizing practice of profiling. We have to begin with this because it is the gateway to many dangerous and life-changing police encounters. The task force should recommend that police departments adopt model policies that strictly prohibit law enforcement from profiling drivers, passengers, and pedestrians on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender, and gender identity. Complaints of profiling should be investigated in a thorough and timely manner, and officers should be disciplined for infractions. Second, we have to curb the excessive use of force. The chokehold has allegedly been banned in New York City, but why are we seeing its use on national television? The task force must encourage police departments to adopt comprehensive use of force policies and to conduct training on these policies and to implement a review and disciplinary process for the use of force incidences that are unlawful. We should emphasize de-escalation in our encounters with the public and not SWAT teams. Third, we absolutely need data collection. How do we hold police departments accountable if we do not have sufficient information? The task force should encourage police departments to collect and report useful data in a uniform manner that allows officers engaged in misconduct to be identified. We need data on stops, frisks, searches, citations, arrests, excessive use of force, and homicides, justifiable homicides. Fourth, the task force should embrace civilian oversight of some kind of police departments. The ACLU supports independent civilian review boards that have real power to investigate, to issue subpoenas, and to make findings that are binding. Civilian review boards that are properly constituted reflect the needs of the community and are transparent. They should provide fair and timely processes for officers and residents, and their decisions should be enforceable. Finally, we ask the task force to do a top-to-bottom review of all federal policies and laws and grant programs that incentivize disproportionate arrests and incarceration of poor people and people of color, including the COPS program and the Burn JAG grant program. Even after 40 years of the war on drugs, drug use has not declined in the United States. It's time we call the war on drugs a failure and abandon these tactics that hurt minority communities disproportionately. In conclusion, the current culture of policing demands far-reaching and systemic reform and warrants national attention and investment, and for that reason, I'm so grateful to all of you for participating in this important task force. We hope that the recommendations of this task force will break new ground and result in policy changes that help end this policing and civil rights crisis. The ACLU stands ready to help all of you.
Thank you so much, Director Murphy. Our third witness on this panel is Vikrant Reddy, who is Senior Policy Analyst with the Texas Public Policy Foundation's Center for Effective Justice. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I know I have 5 minutes. I'll just jump right into it. My name is Vikrant Reddy, and I'm here from Texas, from a conservative-oriented think tank called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Our work on criminal justice at TPPF focuses on the question of how we restore a conservative perspective to prison reform, one that we have with all other issues, one where we focus on costs, we focus on results, we focus on government accountability. Conservatives talk about these things all the time in fields like healthcare and education, and yet it was our perspective that for many, many years, conservatives had stopped asking those questions about criminal justice. Instead, they had said, well, lock them up and throw away the key. I don't care what the results are. I don't care what it costs. That didn't strike us as a particularly limited government attitude. So we fought for a lot of reforms in Texas. We were quite successful. We launched a national campaign called Right on Crime that I hope some of you are familiar with. And I'd like to talk a little bit about one primary recommendation today that is not directed at police officers and is not even directed at members of the public, but that is directed at policymakers and legislators. And that is reversing the extraordinary amount of over-criminalization, as we call it, in American society. You know, when the Constitution was drafted, there were 3 federal crimes. There's treason, piracy, and counterfeiting, I think. Now, the number of federal crimes numbers something like 5,000. Those are just the statutes. There are also agency regulations that can be punished through criminal sanction. Those could be up to 300,000. Those are just the federal crimes. There are countless state and local crimes that are simply unnecessary. I'll tell you where I come from in Texas. We have 11 different felonies related to oyster harvesting. I used to think this was silly and I would chuckle, but I'll tell you, I stopped laughing a little bit a few months ago when that awful tragedy occurred in New York City with Eric Garner, because the chain of events that occurred that led to Mr. Garner's death began when the police confronted him about the fact that he was selling individual cigarettes rather than selling packs of cigarettes. That's a crime in New York. And I think the most provocative thing, most profound thing I read about the Eric Garner case came from a law professor at Yale named Stephen Carter. He's liberal. He views the world a little differently than I do, but I think he was spot on in this extraordinary thing he said. He said, that with all of his first-year law students, he asks them on day one not to support laws that you would not kill to enforce. Because, and I should quote him directly here, Professor Carter said, "The police go armed to enforce the will of the state, and if you resist, they might kill you." These are the things that happen. I think Professor Carter's advice shouldn't just be directed at law students. I think it should be directed at policymakers. I'm going to close by telling a quick story that I think would be instructive here. A friend of mine in Texas who is a district attorney, I was talking to him once about a reform bill I was working on in Texas. I don't remember the exact issue, but it had something to do with low-level marijuana offenses. And he thought that, I thought that he was going to oppose me. And he said, "Vikrant, you need to understand that I'm not going to instinctively oppose everything you're arguing for just because I'm a prosecutor. What you should understand about prosecutors is that when we are in law school and we are dreaming of going on to fight for public safety, this is not what we spend our days daydreaming about. We want to catch killers, rapists, and drug kingpins. That's what gets us up in the morning." I thought this was a really interesting insight, and it got me thinking about whether or not we could apply the same insight to police officers. I highly doubt that police officers, when they're in the academy, that these young men and women who are working so hard are daydreaming each day about catching guys who are selling loosies at the corner in Staten Island. I think they want to catch murderers, rapists, and drug kingpins. And I think that we've created a system through overcriminalization now wherein so many people in our community have lost profound trust in police officers because they feel, understandably, that their sons and their brothers are being harassed because police officers are confronting them and accosting them over issues that, at the end of the day, they don't really feel are crimes. They're not things that we've traditionally understood to be crimes. So I think we should really take a close look at the number of offenses in this society that we've categorized as criminal. We should consider recategorizing many of them as civil. We should consider eliminating several of them altogether. I should note that even though I'm coming from a conservative think tank, we've had a lot of support on this issue from across the aisle. I can only speak for my organization, but on certain initiatives, the ACLU and the National Association for Criminal Defense Lawyers have been very supportive. There were some recommendations issued from Congress just before the holiday on overcriminalization. They came from Representative Bobby Scott. I don't think that these, although I approach these matters from a more right-of-center perspective, I don't think they necessarily have to be left or right ideologically. So I think the final thing I'd say before waiting for questions is just reminding all policymakers to please think about Professor Carter's extraordinary piece of advice to his law students. Generally speaking, don't go around supporting laws that you would not be willing to kill to enforce. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker on this panel is Maria Teresa Kumar, who is President and CEO of Voto Latino. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for having me here today. I want to thank everyone for inviting Voto Latino to speak on a national on this issue. We're a national nonpartisan organization working to empower Latino millennials every day. And today's topic is of critical importance to the Latino community. Latinos respect the fact that police put their lives on the line every single day, and police officers, like the rest of us, deserve to go home at night. While recent high-profile confrontations between civilians and police have directly impacted the African-American community, the Latino community has also a painful history of law enforcement agencies. This history includes the deaths of Andy Lopez, Alex Nieto, Manuel Diaz, Joel Acevedo, and Cesar Cruz, Latinos killed just in the last 2 years at the hands of law enforcement. The recent immigration enforcement practice of rogue Arizona sheriffs and documented racial profiling cases that stretch from Connecticut to California plague the Latino community, and it's plaguing America. In preparation for this panel, we reached out to Voto Latino audience via social media, SMS, and email to provide feedback on how to improve relations between law enforcement and the community they serve. We received more than 430 responses in less than 24 hours, which tells us that this is an issue important to our community and one that they want to be engaged with. And let's be clear, we actually had to cut off the deadline. We couldn't review them fast enough. We received a diverse array of comments, but a few common themes emerged. First and foremost is how our community views the role of law enforcement. The phrase used most often by folks that submitted applications was, to serve and protect our communities. A recent poll conducted by Latino Decisions supports this. 84% of Latino adults agree that the police are there to protect and serve their families. Unfortunately, that same poll showed 68% of Latino adults worry law enforcement authorities will use excessive force against them. It's hard to cultivate a relationship of trust between a fearful population of the police. More than half of Voto Latino respondents indicated they or someone close to them had previously experienced police harassment. Many who said they had not declared, "No, I have not been harassed, but I am white." Case after case has been documented of racial profiling and police brutality against the Latino community. Racism, xenophobia, and increased concerns about undocumented immigrants are to blame, even though today, U.S.-born Latinos account for 60% of the growth in the Latino population. There's a perception among non-Latinos that Latinos are presumed to be immigrants, and immigrants are presumed to be undocumented until proven otherwise. This has led Latinos to fear immigration agents as well as traditional law enforcement police officers. This fear and mistrust hinders law enforcement's ability to protect our communities. And the reality is that these fears are not without reason. African Americans and Hispanics are disproportionately likely to be stopped and searched by police, even though they're less likely to be found possessing contraband or committed a criminal act. The NYPD's controversial stop and frisk program shows similar evidence of racial profiling, with police targeting blacks and Latinos about 85% of the time. In nearly 9 out of 10 searches, police find nothing. Our recommendations for the task force are, again, based on what we've culled through the Voto Latino audience. The first one was to decouple policing from immigration enforcement, eliminate secure communities. Having police officers act as de facto immigration officers is detrimental to public safety because undocumented immigrants are hesitant to call the police or cooperate in investigations for fear of deportation. Police officers should live in the communities they serve. Revise educational requirements for ranking officers. At minimum, ranking officers should have an associate's degree with course study in sociology, communications, psychology, anthropology, and diversity. Hire from a diverse pool of applicants to help bridge the trust gap between law enforcement and community members. Improved and more frequent diversity and cultural sensitivity trainings should be implemented in police departments across the country. Police should be more involved in neighborhood events, fairs, sporting events, town halls. Community participation is very important. Social media should be used to leverage more improved communications between police departments and community members. Officers should receive training in community outreach best practices so they know how to interact with all members of community regardless of race, gender, economic status, or sexual orientation. Across the nation, we are seeing efforts by local police to reach out to the Latino community. In Anaheim, California, a city with a majority Latino population, where protests broke out in 2012 after 2 deadly police shootings of Latino men, the city hired its first ever Hispanic police chief last year. In Las Vegas, Metro Police are expanding the Hispanic Citizen Academy, a 7-year program conducted in Spanish to improve relations with the Latino community. So there are areas that work. Campaigns by conservative city councils, state legislators, and some members of Congress to continue programs like Secure Communities or to propose legislation that makes local police responsible for immigration enforcement do more harm than good. These policies are opposed by the majority of police chiefs in major U.S. cities. So to further provide recommendations, revise existing policies to screen for institutional racism and cultural bias, revise training and curriculum at police academies to make sure our officers are trained to meet the needs of our diverse 21st century community, advise the use of violence only as a last resort. We strongly urge the demilitarization of our police departments. Most officers should be able to have no need to be armed with military-grade weapons. Institute review of police actions by third-party agency, something that both the ACLU and the NAACP mentioned. Law enforcement officials should be held accountable for their actions by independent third-party agency by maintaining a reporting database to track who police stop and why to better assess patterns of racial profiling. Finally, the use of body cameras. Officers should use body cameras with audio at all times. 80% of Voto Latino respondents had said yes, that they were concerned about police officers' ability to turn off the devices on and off, the cost and intrusion to privacy. But overall, body cameras will benefit law enforcement and civilians as one element of an overall program to improve relations. Latinos understand and appreciate the role of the police in our society, but immigrant Latinos, specifically, are reluctant to engage with law enforcement for fear they or loved ones may be deported. As a result, the real statistics of police brutality against Latinos may be unknown. This task force promise is that the conversation is not one of us versus them, but of community building. law enforcement, academics, elected leaders, and the community they serve together. There are too many examples of racial bias against Latinos, and I thank the Vote to Latino community for sharing their input in advance of this task force to help provide solutions. And I thank the task force for taking the need to improve our relationships with law enforcement seriously. My hope is to continue to work towards solving what is clearly a problem so our streets are safer and our communities are stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all of the witnesses here. I'm going to start off by asking Sean Smoot if he can lead with the questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to all the panel members. I very much appreciate hearing your perspectives. And we've had a problem identified, not just in this panel, but in previous panels, which is a problem of creating a diverse law enforcement workforce. And so I'm very curious to know if any of you, in particular, Ms. Hill and Ms. Kumar, because you talk about this, have specific recommendations on how that can be done. I mean, I know it's something that departments struggle with. And in the context of specific recommendations that you submitted, hiring from a diverse pool of applicants, and then revising and kind of raising the educational requirements. And I know working with departments around the country that those two things sometimes compete with each other. So we're eliminating some of the folks that we'd like to hire in as police officers by making an associate's degree a requirement. So I would just like, we're open to your recommendations on that.
I think that one, is finding ways to actually start cultivating in the high schools and start recruiting the high schools. And while I'm not aware of programs right now that provide associate degrees, I can share with you that if you go to nursing is a great example, where nursing you have a strong need to be, for nurses to be culturally competent and bilingual. Santa Rosa, California has an excellent program where they start in the high schools, where they start providing this type of training so that while in high school they're also taking their AA degrees that will actually be the fulfillment of their requirements towards nursing. That's an example of how we can apply a social policy issue and an academic deficiency gap that you're describing in a way that we are already seeing it work very well in the nursing profession, and apply it to our police departments.
Are there others who'd like to weigh in?
Yeah, I think this question is actually directly related to the broader question that we're engaging today, because part of what will help, and it's one of the reasons why it's so critical in the context of civil rights to think about these issues, because we believe that communities should be policed by a diverse police force, certainly a police force that reflects the diversity that's in that community. And yet, in order to attract that diverse police force, the members of that community who are eligible to serve must regard the idea of becoming a police officer as a good thing, as something honorable to do in their community. And to the extent they see police officers as an occupying force, to the extent that by the time you are 17, you have been stopped and frisked a dozen times, that's not a recipe that will make that 17-year-old, even if they're going to get an associate's degree, want to become a police officer. So the two are interconnected, because to be able to recruit really does require that we change not only the perception, but really who police are in our communities. And interestingly, if you think about the role, for example, of firemen and women, they also protect and serve. They are in the community. And in many ways, they have a very different reputation than police officers. People see that as something honorable, as a kind of wonderful thing to do as an occupation and to serve your community. And the challenge that we face is to transform the idea of policing in communities, particularly among young people, into something that they regard as honorable. And that means that they must see police behaving honorably to them and to their brothers and to their sisters. They have to see police at these local events that Maria Teresa was talking about. They have to see police as the person who lives across the street, not as somebody who comes in and knows nothing about my community. So in many ways, it's all of a piece. yes, we do have to reach into high schools, and yes, I do agree with the idea of community college and providing greater education across the board for police officers, but I do think that changing, first of all, who police officers are in our community is an important part of answering the diversity issue.
Brittany Pagnon?
Thank you guys very much for your testimony today. Two quick questions. One, the first is to Mr. Reddy. In your submitted testimony, you have a statement in here talking about overcriminalization, which you just discussed, but also its interaction with the broken windows theory. And in here you state essentially that you don't have to end broken windows in order to end overcriminalization. And that's, I've never heard that before, so if you could just explain that a bit. And then my second question is to Ms. Eiffel. I would love to know, just given the LDF's expertise in education and law enforcement, how do you see, in an ideal way, the education systems locally and law enforcement systems interacting positively?
Sure. I would love to talk about that. I wanted to talk about it in my original testimony. It was just time limited. I think, first of all, broken windows, as everybody knows, has coincided, I won't say it caused, but it has coincided with significant improvements in public safety in New York City. It has also coincided, fewer people realize this, with significant declines in incarceration in New York City. And again, I'm going to be careful and say coincided rather than caused. I think it's difficult to say that one caused the other. It is notable, though, that New York has had particularly significant declines in incarceration as compared to other states. And I think it would be fair to say that at least some of these great improvements in public safety and in incarceration rate reductions can be attributed to broken windows. And for that reason, I would be very reluctant to throw broken windows out altogether. However, I think probably everybody in this room would agree that one problem we've seen in the last several years is an erosion of trust between many communities and police officers. And I think that has also coincided with broken windows. And it seems to me reasonable to say that there's a little bit of causation there also. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I do get asked this question very frequently. Well, how can you, before the reversal of overcriminalization, but also before the maintenance of broken windows policing strategies? And I think my simple answer to that is that the sheer number of crimes is so extraordinary that I really do think you could remove many, many, many of them and still continue to go after certain low-level crimes that are a part of smart broken windows policing. One crime, for example, that I mentioned in my written testimony is graffiti. Graffiti is a nonviolent crime, but it is also property destruction. And I don't think that there's anything improper about police officers getting serious about graffiti, as they did in New York City about 20 years ago. And I suspect that most people in communities would recognize that, yeah, you know, I mean, that's destroying somebody else's property. It makes a certain amount of sense to be serious about crimes like that. And that, to me, is distinct than something like going after somebody who's selling loosies at the corner. So I do think it is possible to maintain broken window strategies, but also find a way to pull back overcriminalization and improve trust between police officers and communities, which I think is really at the core of the problem that we're discussing today.
So it's interesting that in the earlier panel with law enforcement leaders, I can't remember which person talked about the job that police officers are being given, and that it kind of extends beyond law enforcement. And I'm really glad that the question was asked about education, because the overcriminalization that Vikrant Reddy's talking about has not only permeated the community, but it has permeated what must be the safe space and the place of opportunity and development for young people, and that is the school. When we talk about the school-to-prison pipeline, we are talking about the migration of the criminal justice apparatus into the school. And what does that mean? So first of all, what that means is that that look that young people are getting at the police is not happening just in encounters on the street, it's happening inside the school building. Secondly, it means that police are increasingly being used to engage in disciplinary practices within the school. And it also means that students are increasingly then being pushed into the criminal justice system. 2 years ago, we filed a complaint with OCR against the Bryan Independent School District in Texas, where students, high school students, were given criminal misdemeanor tickets for swearing, for using profane language. And so when I say it's all of a piece, that's your pipeline, that's your diversity pipeline that now has a record who now can't serve as police officers. So to the extent that we're thinking about this issue of overcriminalization, the low-hanging fruit are the schools. We've got to deal with the reality that we've got problems in our schools. We've got children who have needs. The needs they have are for counselors and for better instruction and for physical education and for music and for the humanities, and their parents need support and they need resources in their community. It's not that they need more police officers. So to the extent that we've regarded education as the principal means for people to be able to see a future for themselves, that we have allowed the overcriminalization that has pervaded minority communities all over this country to now enter the schoolhouse door and take up residence and cut off the future of young people, that seems to me the low-hanging fruit that we should all be able to agree is something we have to address.
Yes.
I completely agree with Sherilyn, and I also think that the whole problem around schools is something that sets children up for failure, and it also makes children hostile to police officers when they're being thrown out of school and expelled for talking back and all of these sorts of things. So I just also want to say that the federal government has played a very powerful role in the school-to-prison pipeline by making data available to the community to see which kids are getting pushed out. A cooperative agreement between the Department of Education and the Department of Justice released data showing which schools had the greatest problem. That data is accessible on, through the federal government's website, and it empowers the community to look at its problems and see why certain kids, particularly kids of color and kids with disabilities, are being restrained, kicked out, suspended, expelled, and that sort of thing. So that goes back to the point of why data collection in the policing realm is so essential. When communities have information, they can come together and say, we have a problem. Right now, we have communities that are pitting themselves against departments and departments pitting themselves against communities, and they're not able to come together around a common set of facts. And this is what's going to help us with the school-to-prison pipeline, the common set of facts. And we just need that in the policing realm as well.
Thank you. Cedric Alexander, followed by Tracy Mears.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One to Ms. Kumar. You alluded very early on in your statement, you spoke to what probably would equate to recruitment and the recruiting of police officers in this country. And I think you also stated, too, that they should at least have a 2-year degree with some, maybe with a degree in diversity or sociology or psychology or something to that effect, correct? And I'm in agreement with you, first of all. But that being said, there are a number of people who are dialed in today watching this and who are asking the question, if you're presenting that as a recommendation, considering most states across the country, when it comes to police recruitment, only requires a high school diploma, and you be 18, 19 years of age. So if you would, elaborate on that recommendation, and why is it so important for those of us who are listening? Why is it so important that education becomes important in the recruitment of police officers in this country? And in addition to that, the educational tracks that you alluded to, why is that important as well, too?
I think that's an excellent question. Thank you. I think right now we're living in a moment in our country where we have the most diverse group of people that we've ever experienced. But we're also living in an incredibly segregated America. And my recommendation, and that was the recommendation of the Voto Latino audience, is the belief that it's very difficult to take a young kid from, and it was someone that we had this conversation right before we started, to take a young kid, let's say from rural America, 18 years old, who's never seen an African American or a Latino, and all of a sudden plop them up in the middle of Philly, and their only interaction has been what they've seen on TV. The hope by having someone go to school and take such a diverse course load is the opportunity for them to be introduced to difference and sensitivity, and to a maturity that comes with that as well. And that was the recommendation from the Voto Latino audience, and I think it's one that I wholeheartedly believe, because the more you can expose our officers to these types of lessons and cultural competencies, the stronger they are to make sure that they are enforcing not only the law, but they're also protecting the communities they serve. And that's why we highlighted that.
Right, and I have one additional question, and any of you please feel free to jump in as well, too. I often hear, I don't have this challenge in my community in Metro Atlanta, but many communities do. But oftentimes we find it very difficult to recruit African Americans, Hispanics, people of color, if you will, in many communities across the country because of, for a variety of reasons. So the question I pose, which I think is very critically important, even though I think any agency should never stop trying to recruit that population, no matter how challenging it is, just means that you've got to be more creative and find more funding, because it's so essentially important, right, to providing good police service. But in absence of that, would you agree, any of you, would you also agree that you have to find good human beings who are mature, who are sensitive, who have good self-esteem and a very strong internal locus control of self, confident in some life experience and some level of education that would suggest that they would make a well-rounded individual in order to go into any community in America, regardless of whether you're black or white or Hispanic, and provide a basic fundamental police service. Would you agree with that? Or would you have any comment to that?
I think it would be useful to talk to police chiefs who have diversified their workforce and ask them to present their findings about their tactics that work and don't work. I think it was under Police Chief Ramsey when you were here in Washington, D.C. that we had upheavals in the Latino section of Washington, D.C. and Mount Pleasant. There were no Latino police officers. Now when you drive through Mount Pleasant, you see a much more diverse police department. And so there are police departments who figured out, notwithstanding the police officers in schools, notwithstanding the bad images, they have figured out how to attract and recruit people.
Yeah, but that's not my question. My question is, I mean, we're all going to figure that out over time, but the question is, in the interim, what is it, are we capable of still hiring and training men and women who are capable of providing a good police service regardless of who we are as we continue to move towards looking for that diverse population?
I think we can do both.
I think that Vinkrant mentioned it, right? I think a lot of young men and women who are right now in the police academy, they have the intention of serving and protecting the defenseless. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the line, something gets lost in translation. So we have to identify what gets lost in translation so they're not able to do their job. But I think to underline, as a country, we're no longer it's no longer a luxury for us to scratch our heads and figure out this diversity problem. In California and Texas, Florida, go down the line, the majority of children K through 12 are Latino, African American, or Asian. They are our workforce. They're the ones that are going to be filling the police departments soon. So we don't have the luxury of time. There's an urgency of now, and we have to stop saying that it's a nice to have. And I think what's been happening right now in the last couple of years with increased police brutality, it's becoming very clear that's a necessity for us to making sure that we're healing not only as a country, but that we are actually, that our institutions, including law enforcement, actually reflect the America that is currently here today.
I actually want to maybe sound a word of caution on this, because I'm quite capable of keeping these two things in my head at the same time, and I think it's useful for us to think about it this way. Absolutely, we must have diversity in every workforce, but certainly in the police force that engages at that level in the community. But diversity is part of the problem. It is not the silver bullet. There are communities where we have diverse police forces, like Baltimore, where I lived for 20 years and where Laura Murphy was born and raised. And we have an excellent police commissioner now, Commissioner Batts, but we have our share of problems and have had our share of problems with policing. We are under a review by the Department of Justice. So I want to make sure that we're very clear that what we're talking about is a culture of policing. And black officers and Latino officers are just as capable of entering and adopting a problematic culture. Our job is to change the culture of policing, and you are right. Part of the change is identifying the people that you were describing. It's an interesting thing that we think of police officers as being this bright, shiny 18-year-old. You know, for those of us who are a little bit older but can remember when we were 18, we weren't all that bright, even when we thought we were. And we didn't know a lot, and we needed to mature. I mean, I mean this. I mean that we were great.
That on the record?
Yeah, but, you know, it's true. You know, we were bright, but we didn't know everything. Think about how much you've learned, how you matured, how much self-control you had to develop, how much you had to learn about human beings and psychology and how you engage people. Now, what we can do is we can have those bright young people and teach them that. But we would have to be intentional about that. We would have to say, this is what it looks like to become a police officer. And here's where we get to what we're calling this associate's degree or whatever. It's great. Get bright young people, absolutely, but then we are failing them if we don't provide them with the training that they need to be able to perform at the level that we're saying we want them to be able to perform at. Implicit bias is something that every single person in this room has. We walk into a room and we see somebody and we start doing some shorthand. And most of us then, good, right-minded people, take the time to learn about another person. And our views are sometimes confirmed, but often changed. But you have to learn how to do that. That's a conscious act. And you actually need time to do that. So when we see a police officer roll up in a car and shoot a 12-year-old in 2 seconds, that's a problem. So the question really is about what are we training of any age and of any race police officers to do? What do we think is the package of skills that we're trying to develop? And as the officer said earlier, it's not just about how to use the weapon and handcuffs and all the defensive stuff. It's about the psychology of policing. It's about knowing yourself. It's about being engaged with your own biases and knowing how to manage them. And that's real work that has to be taught.
We have a very restricted number of minutes left for questioning. Tracy, followed by Jose.
Okay, I'll make this very short. Thank you so much for your testimony. I really appreciate the fact that each of you offered very specific recommendations given the task that is before us. I want to ask you about a few of the recommendations that you've made in a particular way. This question is probably mostly for Sherilyn Ifill and Laura Murphy. Your recommendations seem to be about, might be characterized as best practices in some sense. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to offer any ideas about moving beyond best practices, not just incentivizing departments to do this, but somehow creating a structure in which the ideas that you offer are more standardized, perhaps even mandatory, for the thousands and thousands of police agencies across this country?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I think I was trying to suggest with the grant program, which on one hand is an incentive, but in my view is how over time you change culture. Let's take, for example, data collection from a police department. If you give a grant to a police department in city X, and then in order to renew that grant, you require certain data from them. You ask them questions about how many people are on the force, what kinds of activities the force engaged in. You might ask about training, but you might ask really very specific questions. You might ask about what kind of training, whether it was implicit bias training, whether there was de-escalation training. You might ask about specific data about encounters with the mentally ill. You might ask about the diversity of the police force from one year to the next. You might ask about civil rights complaints that were filed against that department or against particular officers. The mere questions that you ask about the data that you think is important begins to seep into the department because they begin to keep the data in order to get the money, and you are suggesting what you think ought to be infused into that culture. So I actually think of it as as something quite different than just best practices. I think, if we go back to our own civil rights history, segregation in this country and in our schools officially ended with Brown versus Board of Education. But those of us who are from the North know that most of the desegregation in our schools, to the extent that it happened in that brief period when it was happening, happened largely after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which includes this very provision I described, and in which the federal government for the first time said, schools, we will not give you money unless you desegregate. It was an incentive, and as a result, schools engaged in all kinds of practices, busing and others, to try and integrate their schools, and many of us were educated during that period. So I think we should not minimize it to just describing it as best practices. I think it's a vital tool for transforming a deeply embedded culture.
I agree with what what Sherilyn said, but common mistake, and I should know better. I know both of you. But I do think that we have to write some of these incentives in statute and some of them in regulations. So I do think we need to go back to Capitol Hill and do a little tweaking of burn JAG grants so that they're not just seen as us recommending best practices. No, we want the law changed. And we want the executive branch to use its authority. And all of the items that I listed as recommendations, there are actions that the executive branch could take on its own to implement some of these requirements. And so I don't see these as best practices. I see these as absolute necessities for reforming the culture of police departments. And while I have the microphone, I want to say quickly that broken windows policing is wrong. It targets communities of color for the acts of a few. And we need to go back to individualized suspicion. We're not saying don't go back, don't follow up on lawless behavior. Sure, police should attend to that. But to describe a community when 90% of the people are engaging in law-abiding activities, to describe a community as fomenting lawlessness becomes a self-reinforcing concept. It's about 10% of the black population, 10 to 13%, that engage in criminal activity. And being poor doesn't make you engage in that criminal activity even more. So I just want to put a pin in the notion of broken windows policing. I think in order for us to change the culture of departments, we have to change that approach to law enforcement. And I believe it's just totally unacceptable.
Jose Lopez?
Yeah, I think my question was just spoken to, so I think I can pass for
Okay,
the sake of time.
At this point, let me turn to Ron Davis as to whether we need to wrap this panel up.
Unfortunately, it's a great panel, but yes, ma'am, we do.
Well, let's join in thanking our excellent panelists. Because of time, we're not going to take a break now. Let me turn to my co-chair, Chuck Ramsey.
If you'll just bear with us for a moment, we have to switch panels to our final panel of the day. So it will take a couple of minutes if you want to stretch your legs, but please be mindful of the fact that we're going to reconvene pretty quickly.
Oh, no.
Right, I guess.
Let's get there.
I don't, yeah, exactly.
There's what? All right, thank you very much. We're going to get started with our fifth and final panel for this afternoon. We'll be hearing from three mayors from three of our great cities here in America. We're going to start with Kevin Johnson, Mayor, City of Sacramento, California, and also the current president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Mr. Mayor?
All right, thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'd like to think that I flew the furthest, 3,000 plus miles to get here on a red eye. That's how much we care about this issue. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon to discuss a topic of great concern to the nation's mayors. We are charged with developing recommendations. You are charged with developing recommendations that will be critical to the future of our cities and our nation. We appreciate President Obama's leadership on this issue and the quick action he took by appointing this outstanding task force and setting a tight timeline for your report. We also appreciate the efforts of the U.S. Department of Justice and its cops for office for its support on this task force and for the strong and productive partnership that they have had with the nation's mayors. Attorney General Eric Holder and Director Ron Davis have exhibited real leadership during this difficult period. We know that Loretta Lynch will continue to provide that leadership once she is confirmed as Attorney General. I'm honored to serve this year as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and glad to be joined on this panel by past President Michael Nutter and Vice President Stephanie Rawlings Blake, two outstanding leaders for our organization and their respective cities. The conference's leadership had an initial discussion on what we can learn from what happened in Ferguson during a leadership meeting in Sacramento in September. We discussed this further at a mayors and police chiefs meeting, the 20th anniversary of the COPS program in Little Rock, Arkansas. That meeting was attended by President Clinton and made possible through the generous support of the COPS office. Following the Little Rock meeting, I appointed a working group of mayors and police chiefs chaired by Gary Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, and I charged this group with developing a set of recommendations for local and national actions intended to improve policing in America. Among the members of this working group, all of whom were present in Little Rock meeting, are your co-chair, Commissioner Charles Ramsey, and the distinguished mayors seated to my left. Our group is hard at work and will be finalizing our recommendations during a call tomorrow and at the winter conference in a couple weeks. Here are the 6 areas that they're focusing on. So we're going to give you a little preview. It's confidential. Don't share it out. They want to be able to present it to y'all the first time next week. The six areas are: 1, building police community trust, which is very consistent with why we're here today. 2, improving police department practices. 3, assuring timely and accurate communication. 4, conducting independent investigations. 5, addressing racial and economic disparities. And lastly, providing national leadership. We are very pleased that your co-chairs, Chuck Ramsey and Lori Robinson, along with your executive director, Ron Davis, will be with us at the winter meeting on Thursday, January 22nd, to receive and discuss the recommendations from the full panel of mayors. We have 15 mayors and chiefs that are part of that working group. It is also very important to hear from the U.S. mayors because the issues that we're discussing here today are primarily local issues. Despite the similarities and the challenges we face, each of the challenges must be dealt with within the context of the cities we serve. We cannot pretend there is a one-size-fits-all model. And I think you've heard that from each of the previous panels, that there's uniquenesses and nuances that reflect each of the respective cities. I am so proud of our community in Sacramento. Our elected officials, our law enforcement, our clergy, our community leaders, and our young people for coming together to discuss these issues proactively and productively. And here's what I mean by that. Ferguson took place on August 9th. 11 days later, on August 20th, I convened a huge meeting in Sacramento, not because we had an issue that was above the surface, but because we wanted to be proactive as a community. We had 250 people show up at that meeting. We've had 3 subsequent meetings each month, and I'm very proud of the work that we're doing in Sacramento. I have took the feedback shared at each of these meetings and created a public safety task force in Sacramento comprised of elected officials in our community, and we're working to implement those in the coming year. There are 4 parts of this framework. 1 is training, 2 is diversity, 3 is accountability, and 4 is engagement. And these are going to be consistent themes that you hear throughout. In terms of training, we're targeting recruitment strategies around cultural sensitivity, implicit bias, and discrimination recognition, and certainly de-escalation techniques. Again, none of these things are rocket science, but the cities that do them and implement them with the fidelity are the ones that I think are going to create the trust that we all need going forward. So that's training. In terms of diversity, we want diversity among our line officers, and we also want diversity among our command structure. We want diversity of race, of gender, of sexual orientation, and we want diversity of thought, so our police department reflects the community in which it serves. I know most of you know this, but the city of Sacramento is one of the most diverse cities in the United States of America. Unfortunately, the diversity of our police department does not reflect the community in which we're in. And if you guys have questions on that, we can talk about that a little bit later. But certainly the diversity issue is very important. In terms of accountability, the cornerstone of trust and legitimacy, we want to make sure that technology is prevalent in Sacramento. We're looking at transparency reforms and open data. Body cameras are certainly something that is extremely important for all of us around the country. And then the hot topic, which you guys are addressing as well, is the independent investigations or adopting a special prosecutor in the death of unarmed civilians. There's an opportunity here for all of us. And if we can get out in front of this and build the relationships and bridge meaningful conversations, then I think we can advance this topic forward in a very respectable manner. And the last area is outreach and engagement. I established a steering committee of community leaders that include law enforcement, faith leaders, NAACP, protest organizers, and youth leaders. So you have a group in the community that are going to meet every month. There's a place for them to meet on a monthly basis. That communication and information flow comes to the task force that we created as elected officials, and then you have this dialogue that's real and productive. I appointed this public safety task force to oversee this framework. Let me just say this in terms of Sacramento, and I think this is consistent with what we're doing here today. We want Sacramento, our vision is we want to be the safest big city in California. I know that Philadelphia and Baltimore would challenge me, so I tailored my marks to say the safest big city in California. You guys okay with that? I'm good with that. Okay. All right. I wouldn't win with those two. But we want to be the safest big city in California, a model for 21st century community policing, demonstrated by a major decrease in crime and a measurable increase in community engagement. And that, to me, is the core. You want a situation where crime goes down and community engagement goes up. I'll close with this general kind of thought. When you think about what's taking place in New York, and there might be an elephant in the room or two, but what Mayor de Blasio and what's happening with the unions in New York, that is hard and it's a travesty for all of us. And I don't know what the unique challenges are in those respective cities. So all I can say is that I want Sacramento to be an example in leading the way by partnering with our local police union. I know you had a law enforcement panel earlier. I'm not sure how that went because I got here just recently. But our police unit and our line officers have to be a vital role in Sacramento's effort to build trust and legitimacy. I'm especially proud today that Dustin Smith is joining me for this meeting. He's president of the Sacramento Police Officers Association. I'd like Dustin to stand up real quick so you can see Dustin. Give him a round of applause from the audience. They never get the applause they deserve. I believe Sacramento has one of the strongest police departments in this country. The members of our union are on the front lines of our public safety challenges day in and day out. We must have their support, and they must have our support. We've learned in Sacramento it is that we cannot make real progress unless the police and the community are truly working in lockstep. Mayors stand, and this is why we're so proud and honored to be here today. We stand at the crossroads of our community. We are the leaders best positioned to bridge the gaps in trust and understanding among our residents, all of whom want the best for our cities. The City of Sacramento and the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Tom Cochran, thank you for your leadership. We stand ready to work with you over the coming months to provide any assistance that we can that will contribute to efforts, and I stand ready to also answer any questions that you might have. I thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'd like to turn it over to our past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors from the great city of brotherly love, the one and only Michael Nutter.
President Johnson, thank you very much, and to all of the members of the task force, again, thank you on behalf of our citizens, the opportunity to give testimony. It's a great honor for our city. Police Commissioner Ramsey and Professor Robinson, our co-chairs, all the members of the task force, and certainly my fellow panelists, President Johnson and Vice President Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. As I mentioned, it is an honor to testify before this task force on such an important issue of utmost concern and significance in America today. I also want to thank Ron Davis, our great leader at the COPS office, and the entire COPS office staff. You are great team members and partners with mayors all across the United States of America. I want to thank you for your support as well. Our focus here today, of course, strengthening public trust and building strong relationships between and among law enforcement and the communities they protect and serve, while also promoting crime reduction. I've been the mayor of Philadelphia, my hometown, for now a little more than 7 years. In that time, our administration has accomplished a number of things on behalf of and working with our citizens. I'm proud of every step that we have taken to improve the quality of life in our great city, but none more so than what we have done to increase the feeling and the actual day-to-day activity that goes on in our streets in the field of public safety, creating an environment of shared trust and values between police officers and our residents. I can't talk about public safety strategy without talking about the approach that I took to governing when I became mayor in 2008. I came into office knowing that public safety would be the #1 issue facing Philadelphia, and I needed to address that issue because without it, none of my other goals, job creation, increased graduation rates, growing our population, attracting businesses, and creating jobs, would ever be possible. I took this approach not only because ensuring public safety is one of the primary functions of municipal government, but also because through my nearly 15 years of serving on Philadelphia City Council, that reinforced for me the idea that no city can be great without mutual respect between the government and its citizens. One of my first administration appointments, other than hiring a director of finance to put our city on fiscally solid ground, was the appointment of our great police commissioner, Charles Ramsey. When I was searching for a police commissioner, I looked at many candidates within the department and across the country, knowing that I needed someone who shared my values and vision for a safer, smarter police force and a safer Philadelphia. The entire public safety team that was assembled, including Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and my Chief of Staff, Everett Gillison, Director of Public Safety, Mike Resnick, Commissioner Ramsey, and his deputy commissioners. They've worked together entirely for the last 7 years to make this vision a reality. As a matter of fact, Police Commissioner Ramsey as the longest-serving police commissioner in 35 years in Philadelphia. My emphasis on public safety as the #1 priority is also why I declared a crime emergency in Philadelphia on Inauguration Day, shortly after being sworn in as the 98th mayor of my hometown. I then asked Police Commissioner Ramsey to come up with a plan to increase safety on our streets within 30 days of Inauguration Day. The Commissioner's plan has grown and evolved into a strategy that has reshaped how the job of policing is approached by our brave men and women in uniform, and has ultimately made Philadelphia safer than it was the day before I came into office. Of course, safe is a relative term, especially if you're a resident who heard gunshots outside your home last night, which means our work is actually never truly completely done. Furthermore, with 248 homicides in our city last year, we still have a long way to go. However, this number represents a 36% decrease in homicides since 2007, the year before we began our holistic approach to crime prevention. And in that time period, we've seen a dramatic reduction in shootings and all violent crime in the city of Philadelphia. Every category of Part 1 crime is down in our city. It's because of these measurable statistics that I believe that the city of Philadelphia has, in fact, developed an effective and, more importantly, replicable approach to policing and community engagement, an approach which I will briefly share with you today, as well as my observations as the mayor of what more can be done. I grew up at 55th and Larchwood in West Philadelphia at a time when there was a great level of mistrust and tension between the police department and the communities which they are sworn to serve and protect, especially the black community. As a member of that community, when I became mayor, I knew in my heart that any cooperation or partnership between citizens and the police needed to be born out of an understanding of that history, but also with an emphasis on moving forward. We developed Philadelphia's version of a community policing strategy, which began with an examination of what good policing meant to us. The police could not be seen as an occupying force. They could not ostracize or treat our citizens with contempt. And they could not just drive by in their vehicles, allowing for little to no interaction with our citizens. This type of hands-off policing does nothing to foster personal relationships or trust between citizens and police and citizens, both of whom are critical elements to protecting lives and solving crimes. We wanted to bring about a universal understanding that as much as our citizens rely on police to keep them safe, the police rely on citizens for the information they need to do their jobs. There needed to be an end to an us versus them mentality. And as a government, our belief in working with the community led to listening to residents about their desires for their neighborhoods, which led to our community policing strategy. To build public trust in the integrity and professionalism of our police officers, we focus on the training officers received and our administration's communication with those officers. Training officers to engage respectfully with citizens creates confidence in both groups and goes further in producing a safe environment than any technology or equipment ever could. And just as important as good rapport between officers and citizens is, we also needed trust and understanding between the administration leadership and the rank-and-file officers. We found a partner in this effort in Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 5 President John McNesby. Acknowledging the difficult balancing act officers must perform when they go to work, the fine line they walk between being respectful and taking precautions to protect themselves, conveyed our administration's deep respect and admiration for the risk these brave men and women take every day when they put on their uniforms, and at the same time demonstrated our absolute intolerance for abuse, corruption, or illegal behavior from our officers. Even in difficult economic and socially turbulent times, we have kept the lines of communication open with our union leaders and our police force, and I believe that as a result, it is stronger and more resilient for it. Out of this new approach to training and leading our officers came inspiration to develop a new program, which was piloted with a group of young technology-savvy officers dubbed Listen First. These officers went into the community they served, not just when they were performing traditional law enforcement duties, but also to ask residents about neighborhood issues that remained unaddressed and if they could help residents solve them. The officers took pride in how they helped neighbors fix small issues like broken streetlights, potholes, and blighted lots. The residents began to see the police officers as people who could help them create positive change, not just as uniforms that appeared when terrible events occurred. This concept is not revolutionary. In fact, this is the way policing was done for many years, decades ago. Somewhere along the way in American history, local police forces became almost militarized in their missions and operations, and the distance, both literal and figurative, between officers and citizens, unfortunately, grew. In Philadelphia, we saw a different way and wanted the best of both worlds. The old way of community-engaged policing could be married with modern uses of technology and metrics to measure success. Commissioner Ramsey reinstated foot patrols for all rookie officers, and at the same time, we implemented GIS systems and used data to make decisions about staffing assignments. We created an entirely new, holistic approach to reducing crime with partners at every stage of the criminal justice process, including the district attorney, our courts, the prisons, our parole system, and even our community development corporations and neighborhood town watch organizations. This led, finally, to new city initiatives. Philly Rising, a community engagement entity that reduces crime in the most dangerous neighborhoods in our city by providing residents with education about how to access city services. Gunstat, a metrics-based partnership with the District Attorney's Office to target the most dangerous offenders. And the Youth Violence Reduction Partnership and Ceasefire, both of which bring citizens together who have made mistakes, served their time, and are now considered often at-risk young people with whom we often intervene and set them on the right path. With these new programs in place, we've continued to listen to the voices of our citizens, and we've continued to learn from what the facts tell us. We know that the overwhelming majority of homicide victims and perpetrators in our city, unfortunately, are young black men. So I partnered with New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu to form Cities United, which seeks to address this disparity and improve opportunities for young men of color, very similarly, of course, to President Obama's My Brother's Keepers initiative, which I'm proud to support, and we've already hosted our workshop in Philadelphia. We also formed a youth violence prevention collaborative, assisted by a grant and support from the United States Department of Justice, which partners with the police, the courts, the social service agencies to review the entire youth justice system in Philadelphia and to institute changes to keep youth from falling into the devastating and hard-to-escape criminal justice cycle. President Johnson has also established the My Brother's Keepers Task Force, of which I'm a proud co-chair with Mayor Bell in Birmingham, Alabama. If I've learned anything as mayor about how to ensure public safety in a large and diverse city like Philadelphia, it is that nothing can be accomplished without mutual respect and a shared sense of destiny. The idea that we are all in this together. I believe that this is how we will move forward as a nation into the world of 21st century policing under the leadership of President Barack Obama and this task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, we'll hear from Stephanie Rawlings Blake, the Mayor of Baltimore and the current Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today at this first public listening session of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. To the co-chairs, I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank my fellow panelists who have been on the forefront of this issue nationwide. I want to give a special shout out to Mr. Davis. Thank you very much, Ron, for working with Baltimore City. It's good to see you again. Today's topic on building trust and legitimacy are at the forefront of what we've been working on to improve the city of Baltimore, and I am eager to share with you some of our successes, as well as how the federal government can be a partner in some of our initiatives that we are working on to implement moving forward. Over the past several months, we have seen where the need to build trust between communities of color and law enforcement is an area in need of constant attention. We must remain vigilant in our quest to ensure that our police officers are respectful and accountable while maintaining our focus on providing safe communities for residents, businesses, and visitors. Baltimore has made tremendous progress in reducing violent crime, but we still struggle to repair the breach between community and police. 4 years ago, Baltimore City reached a pivotal moment in the city's crime fight when, for the first time in many years, our year-end homicide number was less than 200. As I toured communities, I expected residents to feel good about the progress being made and acknowledge that Baltimore was turning a corner in the decades-long history of violence that had plagued our city for generations. Instead, I heard that while residents acknowledged the significance of the homicide reductions, they were equally concerned about the tactics used by police officers in order to achieve crime reduction that we were experiencing. 4 years later, Baltimore is in a much better place with finding the right balance between being tough on crime and building bridges of trust within the community. In 2014, Baltimore experienced a 10% decline in homicides, as well as a drop in every major crime category, including shootings, robberies, and burglaries. We've seen significant decreases in the number of excessive force complaints, and we've seen significant decreases in the lawsuits filed against the police department, while at the same time, more residents are reaching out to law enforcement with helpful tips to take violent criminals off of our streets. We have demonstrated that Baltimore can learn from its past. Previously, Baltimore had experienced decreases in crime, yet many of the neighborhoods, similar to what has been said by Mayor Nutter, many of the neighborhoods felt under siege due to the high numbers of arrests. Recent statistics show us striking a better balance, and the community police relationships are improving as a result. This past year, we achieved both reductions in violent crime as well as reductions in the number of arrests that the police department made. In 2015, my administration will continue to work aggressively at ridding our streets of violence and building better relationships between the police and the community. We will implement our new police schedule to put more cops on the street during peak periods of crime. We will work with partnerships with the Department of Justice's COPS program to bring additional transparency and accountability to policing, as well as implement a thoughtful and comprehensive body camera program. The federal government can be a strong partner in our efforts in building better relationships between the police and the community. A good start is a focus on better training for our police officers. They need to learn more than logistics of policing, but also the broader significance of their role in society. My administration has focused police interactions with the community on 3 core principles: impartiality, legitimacy, and procedural justice. And training for the entire department centers on those principles. Our department is adding ethics lessons and situational training exercises, more opportunities for officers to get hands-on experience in the proper ways to work with members of the community. The goal is building the belief in every officer that a safe neighborhood can't be achieved without the trust and confidence that comes from community engagement. But there's more work that needs to be done when it comes to training. Our police commanders are constantly seeking additional dollars, both to develop better best practices and then to teach those practices to our officers and developing leaders. If there is any place where the federal government and the U.S. Department of Justice could produce a tangible impact on our officers and our efforts, it would be to provide more resources in this area. Additional grant funding should also be made available to help local jurisdictions expand their internal affairs divisions to better hold law enforcement accountable when they act unlawfully. One of Baltimore's strategic goals is to have an internal affairs comprised entirely of supervisors. This creates a higher level of accountability in the investigations and ensures that officers are being held accountable for their actions. Having grant funding pay for those positions would expedite that process. A key focus should also include better utilization of technology to build trust between local communities and the police. Body cameras are the next step in policing. To purchase, issue, maintain, and replace body cameras will be expensive. The bigger expense will be the storage of all the data that they record. It is no longer a luxury, but a necessity to hold bad officers accountable, and to defend good officers from false accusations. Body cameras are a necessary tool for restoring public trust and something that I know the Obama administration has indicated a commitment to. Having access to federal funding set aside for the cameras will help Baltimore become one of the first major cities to implement a body camera program citywide. And let me conclude by reiterating the deep appreciation and admiration that I have for all of the men and women who work so hard every day to help create safer communities in Baltimore. I know that they face tremendous challenges, and I know the vast majority of them agree that dignity and respect are at the core of strong community policing. Thank you again for the opportunity to share along with my fellow mayors my experiences in Baltimore, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your testimony. And now we'll turn to the task force members for questions, beginning with Cedric Alexander, followed by Brian Stevenson.
Good afternoon and welcome. And I must say I am very delighted to be in the company of all three of you in three of America's most popular and wonderful cities. And I just don't say that to be said. I mean that sincerely.
Thank you. Can you say that again?
Yes. I have a question for Mayor Johnson, if you would, in Sacramento. You had, well, first of all, let me make a statement. I think you have your union president or union rep present today.
Correct.
That's here with you. And I really want to personally applaud you on that, because I think that just truly really role model the type of relationship that management and union have to have together as we confront many of the challenges that are faced in this country every day. So that is just a wonderful gesture that both of you are here together as well, too. Now to my question, you alluded to the fact very early on, Mayor, that demographically you have one of the most diverse communities in the country. And that being said, I think you also indicated that you would share some of the demographics of your department. But more importantly, for all of us who are listening to the recommendations that you all are making, and for the millions of folks who may be dialed in here today as well too, it would just be great to hear how you all, you and your union president, which I'm quite sure are working together to help diversify your department, because typically that is not something you very often hear from union presidents. Because that's generally not their mission. But clearly, you all have a working relationship, and I was just, I think it'd be helpful for us, and maybe for the rest of the nation to know as well, too. How are y'all moving forward in terms of that process of diversifying?
Yeah, thanks, Cedric, and I appreciate it. So Dustin, again, is here. And it's interesting. You know, I got elected mayor in 2008. And when I first got elected mayor, our police department went from 800 officers because of the economy down to 600. And we've all felt that. And Sacramento was already below where it should be, meaning you should have, in theory, 2 officers per 1,000. Mm-hmm. We were at like 1.56. The economy hits, we go down to 1.3. So public safety is all of our #1 priority, but that was real as I get elected, and I'm thinking, I want to make, obviously, public safety a top priority. And for me, when we looked at some of the crime data over the last 6 years, let me give you this context to get back to kind of your question. Since 2008, our crime rates have gone down by 28%. Since 2008, our homicide rates have gone down 39%. Since in 2013-14, it was our lowest homicide rate in 41 years, 29. Now, how did that happen with less resources and less officers? It's because I made a priority to work with our chief and our union to say that we're all in this together. There's 3 of us. It's the stool. All 3 of us have a critical role to play. So over a 4, 5, or 6 year period, we have been depositing goodwill and trust and investment working together, so that when a situation like Ferguson happens, we had already had a history of working well together. That's kind of my first point. Now, as good as that history and working relationship, we're supposed to be frank here today, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Y'all didn't want us to just be politically correct on everything, do you?
You're fine.
Okay, I'm good. I just need to get permission. So I talked about us having these community meetings after Ferguson. November 24th, we just so happened to have our 4th community meeting on the same day that the Ferguson verdict is coming down. And we're in this community meeting, and we're supposed to start the meeting. We stopped the meeting, and we just all watched the verdict together. 250 people there, primarily African Americans and Latino, in the room with law enforcement. Verdict comes down. I got to make a comment. And this was like, now you're in a moment of truth. Because what you want to say and what you should say and how you say it the right way, you don't have time to have your handlers like script it for you. So, you know, I just said what was on my heart. I said that, number one, Mr. Brown, the father of Michael Brown, wants all of us to protest if we don't agree with something in a peaceful manner. Let's try to do that in his honor, in their honor. Let's have it be meaningful. I said, secondly, there was something about that verdict that just didn't feel right. Now, that doesn't mean the jurors didn't do their job. It doesn't mean that the process wasn't followed to a certain extent the way it should have been, but something just didn't feel right to me. And I said that, and by the time we left the room, everybody in the room was calm. We did it the right way. Everybody felt good. I get home, my phone is blowing up. I'm like, who? So I look at it. It's Dustin, this dude right here, going at me like crazy. You can't say that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I'm like, what did I say? And what ended up happening is they live streamed my comments. And because I said I didn't fully agree with what happened in Ferguson, our local police officers took that as a slap in the face that I wasn't supporting them. So, right, Dustin, so we have this conversation. So he and I meet the next morning. We sit down and have an honest conversation. And here's what I learned from it. 2 things. One, that when I'm going to make the comments, I got to be extremely mindful of our men and women in uniform, regardless of what I decide to say. And the second thing, from their standpoint, they have to let me be mayor and also let me be honest in my remarks as well. And together you can find a way that you can say what you want to do, still be mindful. You can question and challenge a process without implicating or indicting every police force around the country or every local officer. So because of that, that has been the beginning of our relationship becoming real. Because for 6 years it was good, but until it gets tested, so that's why we're here today. We want to show the country that we've had some hiccups and some challenges, but because we've made a commitment. In terms of diversity, here's the data. Sacramento in 2001 or 2, Times Magazine labeled Sacramento the most diverse city in America. In terms of our city, 45% white, police department, 75% white. Blacks in our city, 15%, police department, 4%. Latino in our city, 27%, police department, 10%. In terms of Asians in our city, 18%, police department, 8%. That's our reality. That's our brutal facts. The union and our chief, the mayor and our community, we are committed to laying out a plan and a strategy that aggressively gets at these numbers. And we need to find out how we're going to measure it, what are those target and strategies are around the country, so that we can have our community be reflected in our police department. If you look at Ferguson, that's one of the biggest red flags for all of us, because you have nearly 70% African American and such 4% that represent the police department. We're not a whole lot different in Sacramento. So that's us being honest with our brutal facts, but saying we're going to commit to change those numbers going forward, lockstep and arm in arm.
Thank you very much, and let me just say, I say that sincerely as well, too. Sacramento should be very proud to have you as their mayor. Thank you very much for that, and what you role model here as well, too.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Brian Stevenson, followed by Tracy Mears.
Yeah, I just want to add my voice in thanking you all for your time here and your really thoughtful and clear testimony. I have two really just very particular and specific questions, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm actually interested in how you would define the preferred citizen review board, civilian review board, citizen council. We've heard basically every panel has talked about community engagement, and they've thrown this out, but they're very different models. And I'd like to hear you talk about what's the maximum authority, if you will, that a civilian review board should have in its relationship with the police, because your perspectives on this are really critical, because you stand at that intersection between the police and the community. That's my first question. The second question is, Mayor Johnson, you talked about independent investigations. And I think mayors are also, again, a very unique position here, because typically you don't have jurisdiction over prosecutions and what happens, even though you have responsibility for police departments. What's the, in your opinion, optimal model for who should have investigative authority when these issues of excessive use of force come up? Do you want a prosecutor outside of the county? Do you want internal affairs within your department or some outside? What's your thinking about how these kinds of independent investigations should be structured? Who should have the authority, and how should it operate?
Sure. Let me take a stab at the first one. So I was elected to Philadelphia City Council in 1991, took office in 1992 with the then also new mayor, Ed Rendell, who was a former district attorney. In, I guess, September of '92, so I'm 8-9 months into the position, I put forward the idea that we should have a civilian oversight entity. I met one who I've learned a great deal from earlier, who was on the panel, Sam Walker. Talked to him on the phone, had never met him before until today, and thanked him for his work. So I surveyed the entire country of all of the civilian oversight agencies at the time. As a legislator, took bits and pieces from a number of them, and again, that was 20 years ago, so I'm sure a number of others have been created. To get to the heart and soul of your question, I mean, you have to have engaged citizens. The entity has to be properly staffed, a proper amount of budget. Ours was, their budget was cut like everyone else's budget was cut during the recession. We're looking to invest in them more. But when you talk about authority and how far can it go, from my perspective, for our city at least, the Police Advisory Commission, the PAC is what it's called, can do an independent investigation. They are independent from the police department. I appoint a number of citizens, and the city council appoints a number of citizens, and that is, so they're all civilians. You cannot be a employee of the city of Philadelphia. They make a recommendation. It goes to the managing director and the police commissioner. But from my perspective, given the nature of police work, the ultimate authority about discipline must rest with the police commissioner. The police commissioner is in charge of a police department, has to run that police department, has to be able to give out discipline, and if there is a disagreement between what the Police Advisory Commission recommends and what the police commissioner ultimately does, I mean, the end line of that responsibility is me, as the mayor of our city. And so I think that properly staffed, properly budgeted, and every department and agency in our city government, having now made that statement, every one of our departments wants more money. No one thinks that they're properly staffed or have enough resource. But for this kind of work, I do believe in civilian oversight. I've always believed in it. But the buck really does have to stop with the police commissioner and ultimately with the mayor in terms of actual discipline for officers.
I'll take a stab at the second issue of independent investigations. You know, we've taken multiple approaches, and I think it's difficult, as we talked earlier, about it's difficult to have a one-size-fits-all solution, because there can be high-profile incidents, whether it is an in-custody death or an officer-involved shooting, that while it's high profile, it's not controversial in the nature of the case. So the goal for me is to make sure when there is an issue of trust at the core, that we let it run the normal course. The city's prosecutor does their investigation. We have our internal investigation, and what I have done throughout my time as mayor is, if throughout the normal course of business, there's still a lack of confidence in the community, and people aren't shy about making that known. If there's still a lack of trust, we've on multiple occasions pulled together independent panels, criminal justice experts, policing experts, to take a look at to do that investigation, to review everything, review all the material and the data that's out there, and then make an independent assessment. That being said, does that change the minds of everyone that had a problem with it? Of course not. But when you put together that independent panel and you make sure, and I've been very clear with every time we've done it, that there's no one on here that works for me, and I'm not looking for anything but a true assessment. I don't go into. I'm not asking them to go in this to validate what the police investigation found or determined, or to support what the prosecutor decided. It is an independent review. And I can say, because of that willingness, whether it's in custody deaths or police shootings, to take that approach, it helps build relationships of trust. I think when people in authority refuse to allow independent eyes to take a look at, to investigate, to review an incident, that's when red flags go up in the community.
I'll take a stab at it too, and just say a little variation of what everyone else has said. I think if you take a step back, our ultimate goal is to make sure there's public confidence when investigations take place. They're thorough, they're transparent, and independent. And this is an opportunity, I think, to make something better than it was. And if law enforcement on the other side can, again, understand this isn't an indictment of you, this isn't a lack of support, but if we want trust and legitimacy, if that's really what we want, and if the public is not feeling that, or when you look at this procedural justice that doesn't feel right, when something doesn't feel right, then we got to take a hard, honest look at it. And I think that's where we're getting at. So I'll start off with, one of our fellow mayors, Mayor Plasquelic in Akron, Ohio. He's been talking about this issue for as long as I've been mayor, literally for 8 years, 6 years.
No, he's been mayor 28 years.
Yeah, he's been mayor a long time. And I didn't understand the depth of what he was getting at until the Ferguson situation happened. And as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we call it an emergency call, and he says, that's exactly what I was talking about. So through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Mayor Ramsey and Lord, we'll present to you. I called you mayor. Are you running for mayor?
No, sir.
Commissioner. If it happens, I want credit.
Yeah, I was you talking about your phone blowing up. My phone get ready to blow up.
But our task force is going to present on this issue there. So what I would say to you is, we're honestly in Sacramento trying to look at what best practices are. I don't know what the answer is yet, honestly. I know something needs to change. We are acknowledging there's an awareness on our part. There's a national movement toward looking at an independent investigation and the appointment of a special prosecutor when there's a death of an unarmed civilian. And I think that the police department, I want to be really clear on this, our police department needs to have a very strong relationship with the DA and those who prosecute. So we're not saying that should be lessened or preempt. So maybe 98% of things stay the exact same because they need a very strong relationship. But in the event, when there's issues like Ferguson and Garner, might this give us an opportunity to do things differently in a way that are responsible and productive and that everyone signs off on in a real way? In Birmingham, the mayor of Birmingham, Bill Bell, he's on the U.S. Conference of Mayors as well as president of the African American Mayors Association. Because of the history in Birmingham with the police department, if you guys just saw Selma, it's a reminder, obviously, for all of us. Anytime a police officer shoots a civilian who's unarmed, it automatically injects the FBI. So that gets out of the hands of the local jurisdiction and goes into the FBI. And then they run their process, state level and beyond. That's similar to what Mayor Posquelic is talking about in Akron. So again, I can't tell you honestly, what the right answer is, but I think this is an opportunity for us not to kind of waste the tragedy here, but to seize the moment to figure out how we improve this process. And it'll be partly what the U.S. Conference of Mayors will be presenting to both Lori and the Commissioner a week from now.
Thank you very much. Tracy Mears, followed by Roberto Villasenor.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your testimony and for providing really shining examples of how to build procedural justice and trust at the local level. While I think it's true that you all are, well, how do I want to say this? But I also think it's true that you're overperformers, right? So I'm a social scientist, sort of, and if there is a normal distribution of cities, I'm guessing that you guys would not call yourselves median cities. Maybe you would. But if you don't call yourself a median city, my question for you is to take on some of the remarks that Mayor Rawlings Blake was making about how the federal government can be a partner. And specifically, I'm interested in some ideas you all have about what the federal government can do so that your cities are the norm and not the folks who are at the end of the distribution. One idea, of course, is offering more resources, but I'm wondering how you think about balancing what you need to do as leaders of your own cities, but also trying to achieve more uniformity, standardization, in trying to get all of the cities in the United States to be able to have police department strategies and the like that look like yours.
I'll make just a general comment and then let the mayors kind of address it. I just, in the interest of full disclosure, we all want to say more federal resources. But we said we would let Mayor Rawlings Blake say it because it would probably be received the best if she said. So I'm going to let her start off by addressing the question. We're putting our best foot forward here.
Absolutely. I would say in order to get that standardization, in order to address cities that find themselves in the position of Ferguson, where there's the diversity just isn't there. And I think it's important for the Conference of Mayors to take the lead in hosting conversations, but I also think there's a role for the COPS office and the federal government to help to educate cities and police chiefs on what happens. Not the notion of diversity can fall on deaf ears in communities where they don't understand the value of it. And you don't want communities to understand the value of diversity and the value of bridge building after the fact, because we saw what happens. You can't make it up afterwards. You have to build those relationships. So understand, I think the more we do with bringing, and it's not, yes, it's resources, but it's the resources of people and training and conversation and education to cities across the country to say, we want you to have a diverse department, in law enforcement. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but these are the operational benefits, because unfortunately, I think it would be fair to say, unless people see an operational benefit, they're not going to seek diversity for diversity's sake. It's that the operational benefit. And the thing that I talk about all the time is the importance of building the bonds of trust. And as President Johnson talked about not wasting this lesson from this tragedy, that should be a major lesson for mayors, that you cannot deal with diverse communities without a diverse police force. And you have to do things all across the board, whether it's from recruitment to how you promote within the department. One of the things that we're doing in the police department and in the fire department is to include community members on the hiring panel and on the promotions panel, so that community leaders have a stake in who's out on the street, that their voices are heard when we're making decisions about who will be in leadership, because who is in leadership, that is setting the tone for the department throughout the city. So I think the resource of education would be very, very critical at this point in the history of the history of our cities, because we have to figure out a way to get that message out there. And it can't, some of it can be peer to peer, but I think the strength and the legacy of cops, I think, would be helpful in getting that message out there.
I would only add in, and Tracy, I want to say, I think I did pick up somewhere in the midst of that there was actually a compliment for the three of us. I thought about what you said many times.
I recorded it.
Yeah, I mean, it was in there. I mean, it was packed in tight, but it was. I'm just teasing. She's now embarrassed. We talk about our relationship with our federal partners. We want to enhance that relationship. So, I mean, yes, we do want more resources, but it's also a closer partnership. And so I was here for part of the previous panel, so I'm going to make the connection here. You know, America, of course, suffered the most incredible tragedy on September 11th, 2001. The country was in shock. The world was in shock. And America responded pretty quickly. Within a couple days, there was, within the White House, a new Office of Homeland Security that subsequently became the Department of Homeland Security. We created that because we wanted to be safe. We also created the Transportation Security Administration, about 60,000 people with about an $8 billion budget, just because we wanted to be safe. There's been, in my view, no comparable response. Now, the tragedy, of course, of 9/11 was that 2,997 people were killed that day in 3 different locations on one day. But every year in the United States of America, somewhere between 10 and 14,000 people are killed as a result of violence. We've not had a comparable national, I didn't just say federal, and I'm taking some of the language from my very, very good friend, Mayor Mislandra. We've not had a comparable national response to the issue of violence in the United States of America. And we have a violence problem in the United States of America, and we need to acknowledge that. And until you acknowledge the problem, we will not fully address it. So, you know, I'm sure that money was not just sitting around somewhere. But it was found because America said, we want to be safe in the air. Well, I'd like to be safe on the ground every day in my neighborhood. So I think that, you know, that kind of approach. And so the cops office, I mean, whose budget was whatever it was, Mayor Landrieu knows it down to the penny and how many people you had, and it's been severely reduced. So, and a lot of what we see on the ground, and we have great partners back home, the FBI, the Secret Service, Homeland Security, ATFE, DEA, probation and parole. I mean, they go and catch folks that, I mean, seem to have disappeared, and all of a sudden they pop up with them, and next thing you know, they're being hauled in. So we have great relationships back home, but they don't have the resources that they used to have, and the focus, which is a proper focus for the United States of America, given the insanity over in Paris and other places in the world, cannot take our eye off the ball of terrorism. But we have homegrown neighborhood terrorists who terrorize our children when they go to school every day, who terrorize our old folks, senior citizens, senior Philadelphians when they're trying to go about their business, and terrorize folks who are just going to work each and every day and feel like they can't go outside. And so where is their security administration for what it is that they're trying to do with their lives? So, I mean, we either want to be safe at home and abroad, or we don't. So we are willing partners in this work. In the Boston bombing situation, right? Now, so that wasn't like, I mean, I don't know what those two guys were all about. Still haven't figured that one out. But with all the technology and all the resources, it was a camera in Lord & Taylor's that gave us the best image of those two individuals, subsequently resulting in the death of one and the capture of the other. And so we fight crime every day. Most days it will be Philadelphians. One day it could be somebody from California, or it could be somebody from halfway around the world. And so a closer partnership and relationship between and among all of our federal partners and us as leaders on the ground. When we're fighting crime each and every day. And we'd probably help the feds in the terror search if we had more opportunity with tools and resources. There's a lot of discussion about body cameras, but tasers as well, a non-lethal way of, getting somebody to maybe pay attention, behave themselves a little differently. Consistent training across all of the various departments and agencies across the United States of America. The federal government would have, and the Congress would probably have to take on the issue of grand juries. It's one thing in Ferguson, it's a different thing in Staten Island, and probably something else in Philadelphia or Sacramento or Baltimore, depending on what the state wants to do and what their rules and regulations are. People don't understand it. They often take too long. It's confusing. It is a secretive process, and then even after it's done, you can't figure out what in the world just happened in front of you. But as Mayor Johnson said, something didn't feel right. If we're going to have true trust between and among citizens and law enforcement, we've got to open some of that up, and people have to have a better understanding of what's really going on out here and see an investment being made in their personal safety every day.
Tracy, I'll say two things, and because I know time is of the essence. You guys have been here all day. One is we believe very strongly as mayor, there's got to be more bipartisanship. So I want to really challenge at the federal level. There's got to be certain things that transcend politics. And safeties in our communities, to me, is one of them. So that would be the first thing. And then secondly, we believe very strongly, and we've had an opportunity to share this with this administration, and they've done a great job, but we got to continue to have this be a message that's loud and clear. As when you talk about resources being disseminated, a lot of times some go through the state, and the more that the COPS program and others can look at getting those resources directly to the cities, because we're where the rubber meets the road in a real way, and we want to be accountable to those resources. And I know this panel gets it, but for the record, I just wanted to say those 2 points. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next, Roberto Villasenor.
Thank you very much for attending today. I'm the chief of Tucson. I know all of your chiefs, and it's real obvious to me now why they all speak so highly of you, including Commissioner Ramsey.
Thank you, sir.
But I have a question on a local level.
Mm-hmm.
In all of our jurisdictions, there's competition for available resources. And you all have brought up the issue of the need to fund law enforcement, fund additional training, fund the proper policies. How do you get the community and the rest of your fellow politicians to agree to that when there's such high competing resources such as transportation, parks and rec, and at the same time, crime throughout the country has been falling for the past decade? So what arguments do you use to get that need across?
I mean,
I think you start off by having a strong mayoral form of government.
yes.
That's always helpful.
Yeah.
That's an inside joke.
Yeah.
No, but
I get it.
It almost a joke, but for me, and I can't speak for the other two mayors, we set the budget. I set the priorities, and with respect to how the resources are allocated, the council can't reappropriate any of those funds. They can only cut it out of the budget. So it's about making it very clear up front when you communicate. When we talk about the fact that public safety is our top priority, we're saying that when we're together, we're saying that when we're back at home, we're saying that everywhere. So if you're upfront that this is your top priority, we make those programs and resources a top priority as well. So it is reflected in the budget, and everybody understands upfront where you are. So we don't have, well, there are competing, there's a competition for resources with these, with some programs, but at least in Baltimore, because we're very clear, I've been very clear up front that this public safety and reducing violence is a priority. That's off the table, and we look for allocating resources in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to make it clear. I mean, it's, as they say, repetition penetrates the dullest of minds. I mean, I talk about public safety every day. Any audience, no matter who I'm talking to, that's what we're talking about. And, to the credit of our city council, I mean, there are always competing interests. Every department wants more. Everyone can make a case for why. And, it's our job to make those tough decisions. But it's never been, it's police versus the park system. Right. We had 248 murders last year. We had 1,071 folks shot. I mean, we're not living in Shangri-La in Philadelphia. Things, 36% drop, 25% reduction in homicide. I mean, in shootings. I mean, people see the trend, but like I said, if you heard gunshots last night, the stats don't mean anything, right? So folks know that I'm going to invest in police. And at the worst of the recession, so I said when we came in, we were going to hire 400 more police officers. Didn't happen. Now, we never laid off a police officer, didn't lay off a firefighter, didn't lay off a sanitation worker or a healthcare worker. We didn't do the massive layoffs. That's not a comment on anybody else. That was just our thing. But I didn't hire the 400 officers. We had to delay classes. I had to cut the commissioner's overtime budget. And we had a 15% reduction in homicides in our first year in the midst of a recession. But everyone understood the fundamental aspect of a local government is your citizens have to be safe. So everybody took a cut, but we never compromised public safety, and they still reduced crime in Philadelphia with less police officers than we've had in recent times. But you have to stay focused on that. It's not a trade-off. It is a balancing act. But I'm not trading public safety for anything.
And I would say, Chief, for us, again, very consistent. I look at it in a couple ways. One, and you know this too, and we appreciate you asking the question, but public safety, when you think about resources and prioritizing, public safety goes through every department in a city. Mm-hmm. So you can't just look at it as the police officer or fire's department. Right. What can every department in a city do to make sure you have alignment and a perspective on how we can make our city safer in every department? That doesn't oftentimes cost money. That's number one. Secondly, when you think about the health and the vitality of a city, public safety, when you're talking about jobs, economic development, everything that we all want to see happen in our community is hinging on how safe your city is. Everybody has a self-interest in that, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And I think once we do that, then we create this shared vision of where we want to go. And I gave the example, Senator, you asked me earlier, that if we don't articulate our vision to eventually be 2 officers per 1,000, if we don't get that out there publicly, we'll never work toward that vision. And if the vision is 2 officers per 1,000, it costs $1.5 million for 15 new officers, okay? So if we have a surplus and we don't have that vision out there, then those dollars are going to get spent or lobbied for somewhere else. But if everybody signs off on this shared vision that when the economy is doing well and we have a surplus, we're going to allocate $1.5 million toward 15 more police officers, which get toward that vision. That is very important because we underestimate the public sometimes. If we lay this out there, the public is going to say, that's exactly what we want. If you want better community policing and we need a few more officers to make that happen so they get out of the car and walk their beats and give their business cards and come to the picnic and barbecue and not just in a police officer's role, you have to have more folks to be able to do that. And then the last thing I need to admonish all of us, we got to tell the success. We got to tell the story. We've got to measure what we've done and then articulate it so that people know that investment is there's a return on that investment.
Thank you very much. The last question from the task force will come from Connie Rice. And for the sake of time, I'd encourage everyone to be as concise as they can be. Thank you.
All right. Trying to be concise. Can you hear me? Yes. I need to know from you, expert mayors, your assessment of how well we're communicating with the union leadership of the cops, because there are days when I think I'm okay, and then there are days like today when I think I've completely missed them, and that they're talking this way and I'm talking this way. Do the unions understand what the communities are saying about the need for more understanding from police, or do they see it as just an attack on their rank and file?
I'll start. One of the things that, when I talked about legitimacy, this is work that has to be done. And I often talk, I had a meeting with community leaders yesterday, and I talked about this building these relationships of trust between the community and the police. I said, I think we have to think about this like a marriage. You can be married for a long time and not talk. It happens. But if you want it to be solid, if you want
hold on. I wouldn't be married for a long time if I wasn't talking.
I am not saying that I am either.
I just don't want to get in trouble when I get home.
I am suggesting that you can have a healthy relationship or you can have an unhealthy relationship.
Amen.
You're going to be in relationship. It's going to be there, right? It's just a matter of whether you choose it to be healthy or not. And for us to talk, we have to hear each other, and we have to be willing to put in the work. We have to let the police have to hear from communities what they feel when I talked about it before, and we were able to get the homicide rate under 200 for the first time in decades. And I didn't think I was going to be hoisted up on their shoulders, but I thought it would have gotten a better reception. But I would go into communities, and they were mad. They were like, my son is not a criminal. And when I send him to school, he is getting straight A's. I don't want him to feel that he is under siege by the people who are supposed to protect him, that he has to be on guard when I send him to the store. So, police officers have to hear that.
Do they?
But
do you think they do?
I don't know if enough communities are entertaining those conversations. You have to put into place opportunities for people to hear those conversations. You have to make it important, and you have to foster that honest communication. And communities need to hear from police that they are putting their lives on the line every single day, and they have families at home that they want to be able to go home to. So when they come into a community and they feel that there's no help, and that the community is I've heard they say they feel the community is apathetic to crime and resistant to them. The community needs to hear that, because we can't do it. We are going to be in this relationship. There's nothing that the police can do on their own. There's nothing that the community can do on their own. We're married. It's just a matter of whether we agree or whether we commit to having a healthy relationship.
I know you clearly recognize the complexity of your question, and it will be impossible for us to characterize. I don't know how many officers are in each of the other two cities. We have 6,400 police officers who will have 6,400 different views and ideas on any given day. I mentioned in my testimony our FOP president, John McNesby, who I do talk to on a regular basis, and the commissioner talks to him even more than I do. On our best day, it will be impossible to be in the hearts and souls and minds of every one of those officers. And union leaders, and I respect them, but I think we also need to acknowledge, they're union leaders because they were elected, just like us. So they have a constituency. I just have a slightly larger one, 1.5 million people. And so they often either do or try to or feel that they have to reflect, some of the things that are on their members' minds, or you won't be the union leader. And so, and then there's the local chapter of, let's say, the FOP, and then there are, I don't know, 1,000, Commissioner knows, maybe there are 1,000 FOP chapters across the country, and they all get to talking, and, so, there's a lot of conversation out there. The officer on the street wants to do his or her job, be engaged with the good people in the neighborhood, protect themselves from the folks that mean them harm. I have lost 7 police officers killed in the line of duty, a number of them shot to death. Now, you want to talk about a bad day at work? I'm not sure what's second, but the absolute worst moment of entire time being mayor, an elected official, be at the hospital when a police officer has been shot, or a firefighter dies in a fire, or a PGW worker dies in an explosion, or one of our fleet managers falls and cracks his head and dies. Be in that hospital. See that family. Talk to them about what's going on at that moment. So they want to go home too. And so we have to bridge this divide. So I don't know what's in the head and heart of all these officers, and we can't legislate it. We can train, we can talk, we can provide leadership on both sides, the mayor and the union leadership and the police commissioner and all those other folks. But when you're in that moment and someone is staring you down 10 feet away with a gun in their hands, and you're not sure what they're going to do, you're going to do what you're trained to do. And I think, as Mayor Rawlings-Blake said, community people want good police officers. I don't think that's the totality of what the protests are about. We're all against bad policing. And most good police officers don't want bad officers on the force either. And so that conversation really does need to take place, and this task force obviously is helping with that. So I think the message is getting out there, and the things that Mayor Johnson talked about, Ferguson, Staten Island, and 100 others that are not on CNN and MSNBC, people are talking about these issues. We're going to have some more heartfelt conversations about it, but everybody wants to go home safe.
Ms. Robinson, I'll make mine pretty succinct. I think 2 things. One, I do think officers, by and large, feel like they're being attacked. And I do feel like the community, by and large, doesn't feel like it's being heard to the degree that it would like to be.
How do we bridge that?
And I think the onus is on all of us to really do a better job. And I think I have my union president here in the front row. We're modeling what can happen. And our sets of circumstances may be unique in Sacramento to some other city. But if we can create a framework for what works in Sacramento and then share it with our, Tracy, you mentioned earlier, how do you make sure some other cities are benefiting as well? We've got to share best practices. You guys here are creating an awareness to have an honest dialogue. People don't like to talk about economic disparities and race. Those are real issues. And if he and I can't talk about them, then our community is going to suffer because of it. There's words like justice and fairness and respect, and it goes both ways. So I need to lead with, this is what I've learned, I need to lead with letting my men and women in uniform know how much I appreciate what they do. I have to lead with that. Once I say that, then they will hear me when I start saying some things that we can do differently. And here's the one sentence I've learned. If I sit down with Dustin here and he says that we're doing everything right as a police union, I've got a problem with that. If he says to me, we're a very good police union and we're doing a lot of good things, but we want to be even better, then we've just created an environment where we can work together.
Well, thank you all very much, and please let's give a round of applause to this distinguished panel. We have run over in time, so we're going to move directly into audience participation now at this point, and I'll turn it over to Ron Davis.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we're now going to move into the public comment period. There have been cards that have been passed around. People can put their names on. As we told you at the beginning, we wanted this process to be as open as possible. We're also taking comments from online, so we'll kind of go back and forth, take someone from the audience and then someone online. So on the sake of time, I'm going to start the announcements, the names. You don't have to come to the mic. We'll come to you with the microphone. And let me thank you. Let me apologize ahead of time if I don't pronounce your name correctly. Thank you. So first person, I'm assuming it's going to be Kimon Freeman, Mayor. And if I could say thing, Mr. Freeman, before you start, this won't be a question and answer session. This is we're looking for a recommendation or comments. The task force will not be responding as far as answering questions. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay.
Sir.
All right. Thank you for having us. I've been here all day, and it seems to me, aside from Brother Mayor KJ right here, and I really want to thank him for his being not being PC. Thank you, sir. That's what we need. But except for his testimony, I feel as if we have been in a parallel universe. Do we know why we're here? I mean, do we know why the president convened this task force? It wasn't for us to talk about how good of a job our police are doing, or how much the crime rate has gone down, or how we can do this better. We're here because it's been open season on the murders of unarmed citizens. That's why we're here. Or should I say, we're here because there's been an outrage against that, because this has been going on, the type of policing against people of color in this country for centuries. This has come to a head because we are under the tutelage, or should I say, under the jurisdiction of a black president and a black attorney general, and it has not changed. So in lieu of that, it has come to a head because the system seems to be unwilling or incapable of putting a leash on killer cops. It seems as if that no one is actually in charge of the police. At the sake of upsetting a large organization of armed white men, it seems even in New York, as we have seen, that there is a great ocean of divide between the community, the so-called leadership of the police officers, and the police officers themselves. This is unacceptable. How do we do this? We need community control of the police. Mayor KJ has suggested that in an instance of unarmed citizen being killed by the police, that they kick it upstairs to the FBI. Well, we've seen that the FBI and their role has been questionable historically. What we need is community control over the police. The citizenry are basically unaware of their rights in dealing with police officers. We don't have civic education in that regard. And police officers take advantage of that. They are trained to take advantage of that. And there's two types of policing. There's policing for people of color, and there's policing for those who are not. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are not of color do not have a point of reference. They have not been verbally insulted by police officers. They have not been thrown to the ground. They have not been having their car searched or their belongings thrown onto the ground. Doing a traffic stop. 96% of all the arrests in Washington, D.C. is nonviolent. We need to understand this. Broken windows, this is basically acting as a domestic occupying police terrorist force in communities of color for the safety and the comfort of those who are moving in. So settlers displacing natives and their comfort supersedes the quality of life of people of color. And we're here because no one has put a leash on killer cops. So I have 5 recommendations.
You have 30 seconds, sir.
Here we go. Number 1. We need to have a legitimate citizen review board with the power to fire and indict officers for misconduct. Most cities already have an office of police complaints, as we do here in D.C., but they do not have these powers. They are paper tigers, and we need to give them that power. So they are actually responsible for the people they're serving. We should require a significant percentage of police that work in the community to actually live in that community. This has been tried before and has found to be unconstitutional. To require people to live in designated areas, but how can this simply be overcome by challenging these rulings in court to reflect similar requirements for our local politicians that are forced to live in the areas that they do represent. The mayor must live in the city he or she represents. The council must live in the area of the city that he or she represents. Why not the police? 3, have an automatic expulsion clause that dictates that any officer who causes a loss of life of any person who is found to be unarmed and innocent of any wrongdoing to be automatically fired and subject to further prosecution. 4, every year in every city in this country, millions of dollars are awarded in civil lawsuits to settle cases of police misconduct. All of this money comes out of the city's budget. The financial liability should be shared with both the budget of the police department and the salary of the officer in question. I assure you this more than anything else will immediately alter the behavior of road cops. Finally, 5, engage community input into the city negotiations with the all-powerful police unions for any future contracts and add transparency to this procedure. Therefore, we need to get rid of the grand jury system because it's obviously not working. We have not seen one indictment in years with all these cases, and this is why we're here, and this is why the president convened this task force to put a leash on road cops. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I'm going to turn next to a comment from online.
Right here, Ron.
Oh, thank you.
SAI has been collecting throughout the day comments that have been produced online from the website and from Twitter messages. And the first comment that I would like to read was submitted online. There is no doubt that all agencies have had issues of bias, even discrimination, and these issues do need to be addressed. Even so, it appears law enforcement is being painted with a broad brush, and I don't believe this is fair to agencies that are more progressive in combating these issues. We must work together to solve this problem.
Thank you. And once again, forgive me on the name pronunciation. Dr. I think Li Young? No, ma'am. They'll bring a microphone to you. Come right to your left. You can stay where you're at, Dr. Young. They'll give you a mic. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for all your presentation. But I request for testimony in comment since early this morning, of course before 8. And I also represent the index card request again in writing. Hopefully we have enough time so you can digest what I'm trying to say. I have been here all day, and thanks for all the panelists, and thanks for all the speakers. But the problem, what I heard is policing, but I rarely heard about social justice. Now, police don't just kill people by gun, by gunshot, by brutality, by punch. Police have all kind of misconduct. You know, they have involved foreclosure, eviction. They have sent people to dragging people on the ground, pull people's hair, punch and give people's blood, and probably that's one of the reasons I oppose the death penalty, because they draw people's blood involuntarily by the patient or their family. They don't even get approval, but they draw it by big tubes. So you think that you can imagine they can have a plot, all kind of murder to victimize somebody they don't like. And they can prison or send to mental institution because they are political prisoners or some kind of dissenters, or somebody is anti-wars, or somebody who is opposed their political view, or somebody who is opposed their political budgets. So that's just all kind of things. The police will go to the city hall, will go to the council meeting, will go, of course, what I mean is broadly speaking, law enforcement, they including sheriff or security guard and things like that. And then they will maybe abduct the people who want to testify and abduct them out of the hearing room, or will not even allow them to listen, just listen, not even testify. Just listen to other people's comments. Now, one of the reasons is a lot of people who support a politician is who want to have a benefit, so always have a bad legislative proposal. So that's why I always testify against those, especially if you think about, I am from Montgomery County, Maryland. The Montgomery County is supposed to be famous for education, famous for intelligence, famous for prosperity, but that's not the case when you consider the government function and the police.
30 seconds, Dr. Young.
Oh, how much time
30
do you
seconds,
give?
ma'am.
How much
31
time
31
altogether?
seconds, yes.
How much altogether you give it to me?
2 minutes.
I know you give the other speaker 15 minutes or more.
Yeah,
But you didn't tell me how much minute I can have.
yes, ma'am, 30 more seconds, Dr. Young.
So how much total time you give it to me?
Every speaker will have 2 minutes, Dr. Young.
Every speaker have 2 minutes. There's nothing in just in your proposal, in your testimony. Say what you say is that the president's task force on 21st century policy.
Dr. Young, are you finished with your comments?
No, what
Okay,
I try to
please
say,
continue.
I'm just started.
Please
And
continue.
you don't just according to this, the 21st century policing. You don't even talking about equality of speaking time.
Yes.
Okay, I try to say.
Thank you, Doctor.
No, I'm just to say I don't have time to argue with you. I know you have a lot of security done. So what I try to say is simple. I would like to submit a written statement,
That would be
but let
great.
me a brief comment so you understand what I submit.
That would be great. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. What I have here, because I just heard the hearing last night, so this morning I had to get up before 5, so I can come here. So what I try to submit is I agree a lot of people.
Dr.
say-
Young, we're out of time, so how about we do this
I
before you continue?
understand.
Before you continue, Dr. Young,
I-
we can continue afterwards. I will give you personally another 5 minutes after we close, and I will listen to it and take your written testimony as well.
Excuse me, we are in public hearings.
You have 30 seconds, Dr. Young.
Thank you.
Okay.
But I hate it. You are not deserve that position. Okay, now, I agree with this. What I try to say is I have been running for public offices. What our system doing is distortion of resources to benefit few. Now, we have 1%, 99% income inequality. That's the problem of our system. So what important thing is that when I think of black, you got to see how they suffer, but nobody really tell how they suffer. Everybody is thinking about how do we get money from federal. That's people's money. Okay, now what I try to make it simple. Social justice is in great danger. When we have work to be done, we got to promote fairness, freedom, justice, peace, humanity, productivity, well-being of general public, resolve social political issues, balance budget, oppose so-called Fair Election Act, that's public finance matching small donor by some, that's wrong level, non-profit organization. So that public finance with matching small fund is do more harm than good. So just by that, they take away all my computers, all my internet connection, my internet Yahoo account.
Dr. Young, that is time.
So
We're going to proceed to the next person.
Within seconds.
Thank you, Dr. Young.
I want
There
you
are
to
people
be,
behind you that would like to
within
speak as
sec-
well.
I want you to be sure to investigate this murder, fraud,
The next up will
crime,
be Guadalupe
injustice network.
Comfort. Dr. Young, we
I
have
would-
other people that would need to speak
No,
behind you.
I would, that's why I want to.
Ms. Comfort?
I would
Thank you.
give you
We'll handle
six-
the microphone. Thank
I
you.
would give you just written statement
Please.
with 6 attachments.
Outstanding. Thank you, Dr.
So
Young.
please be sure to have a very careful
I'll make sure the task force
read
gets a
it.
copy. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Comfort. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I never thought I would be in this situation. My 26 years old, Emmanuel Okutuga, was gunned down in Montgomery County on February 19, 2011, by a police officer that said he told him to stop like 30 times in 30 seconds. I don't know how that is possible. My problem is accountability. If these police officers knows they will be, prosecuted for a crime, God forbid, if you and I kill somebody, you know the consequence, but they can hide behind the badge and murder our children. I've been here all day, listening to the police telling us they want their officers home. So do we. We want our children home. Okay? We send them to school, not to come back in the body bags. There's good cop and bad cop. And I want to take this time to thank Chief Ramsey I was a vendor for 25 years in the District of Columbia, right there by the White House. That's how I sent all my children through college. You did a fantastic job. You stood up for those bad cops that they were taking bribes. 2 of them were convicted under your watch, and I thank you for that. So and there's a lot of good cops out there too, like Sergeant Scott of Montgomery County, and he did a fantastic job. But officers like Christopher Jordan, who murdered my son, should be held accountable. And there's a whole lot of women out there, Black African American children that are being slaughtered by the people that are supposed to protect them. Please help us look into this. My son did not deserve to die on a street like a dog in the hands of somebody that was supposed to help him. Yes, I'm mad about that. He was a law-abiding citizen. And it was captured on a video. 13 eyewitnesses. Video. State attorney telling me somebody mistakenly deleted that video. How do you justify that? That was a murder, not a justifiable homicide. Help us to keep our streets safe for our children. They're not supposed to be slaughtering them. They're supposed to be protecting them. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Online?
Well, before I go to online, because people, I'm going to do a bit more online than more in person online. People have been sitting here very patiently, so we apologize for that. Let me go with George Fisher. Or was it, I'm sorry, Faulkner. Yeah.
Thank you. Just, I have one small but very important comment for the Commission regarding any recommendations of forthcoming data collection efforts regarding deadly force on a national scale. And that is that fatalities make up as little as half of the number of officer-involved shootings that actually occur. And the distinction between a fatal and non-fatal incident is not the intent of the officer per se. As many on the Commission know, police are trained, with the very few exceptions, trained to aim for center mass. So whether or not the suspect dies could be impacted by a number of factors, such as the proximity of a hospital or the chance location of the bullet wound. Therefore, if we want to understand the phenomenon of deadly force, police use of deadly force, we should stop referring only to deaths in custody and expand our call to collect all uses of deadly force, all officer-involved shooting incidents on a national scale, including missed incidents, injurious, and deadly force incidents. Thank you.
And I'm going to pass the mic to Chip Stewart, who's going to be next. But before James Stewart goes, who I have his card, I just want to remind the audience that all your comments are actually being captured. It will be presented to the task force in a written format as well. And if you don't have an opportunity to talk today or you're not talking today, still feel free. We would strongly encourage you to still, you can go online and provide comments as well. So, James Stewart.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the Commission. You're talking about building trust and legitimacy with the community. The one issue that stands out, that's been brought up a couple of times today, is when a critical incident occurs where you have a shooting of typically a suspect, and that suspect is unarmed, and that suspect is African American or Latino. And one of the issues that the community has complained about the most that I've seen is that the fact is that when the police disclose any information, they say, well, there's an ongoing investigation, so we can't release any more information other than the name of the person that was shot, and they move on. Now, there's a criminal prosecution that can occur subsequent to that, but I want to direct your attention to something that I consider more important, because it is the changing of a police department, and that is that the internal investigation or the independent investigation of that shooting to see whether it's justifiable or non-justifiable, that is a legal finding. That should be left up to the prosecutor and to the coroner. What the police department ought to take a look at is whether it's in compliance or out of compliance with the departmental policies, training, procedures, and best practices and tactical judgments. That has not been the case by most police departments. They merely look at a situation, they say, at the moment the trigger was pulled, it was justifiable. And what I suggest is an independent investigation to show what the precursor incidents were that brought the officer into contact with the individual, the circumstances that happened, and whether there were any moments to de-escalate or to alter the tactics that occurred. That can only be done by a separate and independent investigation. I want to direct your attention to two locations.
30 seconds.
Okay. Let me just say that the Use of Force Review Board can make that finding, or an independent investigator can come in and make that finding. It doesn't have to be a special prosecutor. The role model is Las Vegas Police Department, which actually has 4 civilians who are voting members of the Use of Force Board and 3 sworn officers. I don't know of any other department in the United States that offers that, and that's why I'm bringing that up. But in order to make an informed judgment, they have to have an independent investigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go to online.
Okay, we have a Twitter message from the National Council of Churches. Mass incarceration is the civil rights issue of the 21st century.
One more.
Next one, we recommend body cameras for police and for federal funding for communities that cannot afford them.
Okay, next in the audience, I have Dr. Stephanie Myers. Oh, thank you, Doctor.
Well, thank you very much for this excellent session. All of the panelists have really been outstanding. I represent Black Women for Positive Change, which includes a volunteer network of women and men of all faiths and gender and race. And we really believe that in addition to the operational issues that have been so beautifully presented today, we must step back a little bit and address the entire culture that we're dealing with. Our overarching theme is that we really need to change the culture of violence in America and really throughout the world. But we know that America is the standard bearer for so many issues. So we urge the task force to address some of these larger issues. We urge you to call on Hollywood and the media to stop promoting violence in film and in social media and to begin to look at different ways of communicating. We call on the task force to find ways to give youth a greater voice. And through the use of technology, social media, film, we know that our young people have incredible things to offer and to engage with us. We must find a way to do that more effectively because they're the ones who are in the body bag so often. And we must find a way to make them a part of the solution. We also propose that you support the National Week of Nonviolence. There have been 2 years of this already, supported by 12 governors, 50 mayors, and that the task force consider calling on the nation to have a National Week of Nonviolence next October 2015 and call on neighborhoods, churches, schools, police departments to sit down and talk about conflict resolution, nonviolence, building partnerships, building trust, and all of the issues that you have addressed today. And finally, in terms of best practices, our organization is partnering with the Pittsburgh Police Department, and we would like to recommend that you take a look at what they're doing. The police chief is having community conversations in public housing facilities, at churches, with people. He's sitting there for hours letting people ask any question they have. And so we urge you to call the nation during this week of nonviolence and the rest of the year to have community conversations. Ask the leaders to do it. They can do it. They're ready. They just need to have some leadership and direction. So we propose that you contact Chief Cameron McLeay and explore this whole issue of how to get the nation in a conversation. Los Angeles is doing great leadership. Sacramento, all the things we've heard. Let's have a national conversation using social media and change the culture of violence in our society. Thank you.
Keith, great.
Good afternoon. Everyone hear me? There we go. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for this commission. It's been a very good day. I've been here all day. And I'd like to say to you, thank you for coming and thank you for being able to maintain your composure and to see that there are good officers and bad officers as well. and we're very sorry for your loss. Again, my name is Keith Gray. I'm a former D.C. police officer, also a former educator. Prior to entering the force, I was an educator, the K-12 system, also taught at a university in Hillsborough County, University of South Florida. My background is very unique in that I come from a small town in Longview, Texas. I hated cops growing up, but I always liked this one cop who was a detective. Came to my class, it was actually one of my classmates' father. And I said, I want to be a detective one day. That's exactly what I did. I spent 5 years in the Metropolitan Police Department after this gentleman's reign, but we benefited from everything. I was over in the 8th Street corridor, 5th District. Whenever you take a visit to 8th Street now, and you see what it is now, you're able to walk on the streets at night, that was my work. That was me and my partner's work, okay? That's why. All right, that's why it's so important for us to have a police force who's competent, able to work with the community, and able to change things because of what you're seeing happening in Washington, D.C. right now. This man came in and changed the culture of D.C. I want everyone to know that. And now he's changing the culture of Philadelphia. And we thank him for that. But again, from a small town in Longview, Texas, I came here and joined the police force. And since I wasn't part of the police force, I joined at a later time. So I came in after a career in higher ed. I've been a professional recruiter of students. I've been a manager of programs at a university level. I started to work on my PhD. I said, I want to be a cop. I still wanted to be a cop. It never, ever went away. After I graduated from American University in undergrad, I was very blessed to go. I played basketball professionally, traveled the world. Every police department I paid attention to, they were all centralized. This is the only country, first world country, where you have a decentralized policing structure. And having things like this in place to where you can bring a uniformity to police work is very, very imperative. Just like, for example, some gentleman mentioned the TSA, the formation of TSA. What happened before 9/11? Every single airport, they had private security.
30 seconds.
And now you have uniformity. You know what to expect. I can take this. I can take my flask with me. I can't take my flask. You know exactly what you can take on that plane now because of the uniformity of that. But I want to make three quick recommendations. First is to change the culture of law enforcement. It has to be changed from the inside. We have to put it on our shoulders. The gentleman, Chief Canterbury, who was sitting here, it made me cringe to say that we did not have responsibility, or it was not important enough for us to put it on our shoulders as law enforcement officers to be professional. It is our profession, all right? We don't expect the community to be as professional as we are. We are the professionals at being police. So we have to put it on our shoulders. So the culture of police work has to change. Officers can no longer be subjected to minor backlash and minor offenses because they're doing something out of the realm. What happened with me on police work, I got
10 seconds,
tired.
Mr. Gray. Sorry.
Sorry?
You're down to 10 seconds.
Okay. What happened with me is I got tired of enforcing laws that I did not believe in. So I changed. I'm now a small business owner, and this is what I plan to do as a work of mine. This is my civil rights movement, connecting the community with police again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Edwin Raymond.
Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
All right. First, I'd like to thank the president and everyone else involved for providing the platform for this essential and overdue dialogue. I came here today with my good friend Jim St. Germain. We are both co-founders of a nonprofit that's just starting up. It's called Plot, Preparing Leaders of Tomorrow. And earlier, one of the panelists stated, with the way in which community members are treated, why would a young black man want to join the police force? And theoretically, it makes complete sense, and statistically, she's accurate. But I'm actually one of the few young black men that decided, despite of the treatment, to join the force. I've been a police officer for 7 years, and I do my job honorably. One of the things that all the panelists mentioned was diversity, the importance of diversity in our police departments. It is important, but unfortunately, it's completely undermined if there's existing policy that doesn't allow it to flourish. And I'm speaking as someone with front row seats to the madness. Where I work, it's the most diverse police department probably in the world. And that the beauty in that is completely taken away because of inherently racist policy. Stop, question, and frisk was very popular recently. I'll share some numbers. 2011, 700,000 stop, question, and frisk, 515 homicides. The existing administration then said those stops were the reason for the decrease in murder. Last year, 2014, less than 50,000 stopped, 326 homicides, 37% drop. The critics said, you know, they'll eat each other in Brownsville, Brooklyn if we don't stop, question, and frisk them. But obviously that's not true because 600,000 less and homicide still drops. And the broken windows theory is another thing that it's counterintuitive, the truth. Theoretically, it seems to make sense. If you go after the small things, the big things will sort themselves out. But the last 2 weeks in New York City has exposed the truth, which is, you know, what the media refers to as a slowdown. Homicide nothing increased. You know, there's no anarchy in the streets of Bed-Stuy, you know, and despite of this slowdown.
30 seconds, sir.
Okay, I want to finish with a, you know, critique. Now I want to finish with a recommendation. Critical race theory. I recently took a course in John Jay College, anthropology course, Policing a Multi-Ethnic Society, in which critical race theory is what's being taught. I want to share quick testimony from one of my colleagues who took the course. He says, my name is Raymond Shea. I'm a member of the New York City Police Department, as well as a current student in John Jay. During my fall 2014 semester in John Jay, I attended an anthropology class called Policing a Multiracial Society, where critical race theory is learned. I found the class I took was exceptionally beneficial towards my work as a police officer. Learning about the culture and history of black discrimination allowed me to understand why members of underprivileged black communities distrust the police. Although many police officers see themselves as racially colorblind, governmental policies promote racial discrimination and targets impoverished neighborhoods. Prior to taking this class, I had little to no knowledge of discriminatory actions against black people. As an Asian American growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, I was never exposed to intensive policing and social disenfranchisement these penalties caused. I used to believe that everyone arrested were perpetrators of the law and hardened criminals should not be reintegrated back into society. Now I try to communicate and connect with the offenders on a more personal level. After learning about the history of black discrimination and being more culturally aware, I view some of these individuals as victims of an imbalanced judicial system. This class has been exceptionally beneficial for me as a police officer and has allowed me to understand and communicate with the communities I work in. I strongly recommend this class for officers to expand their knowledge of various and diverse neighborhoods in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. I have one card here I'm going to read. There's no name, but there's a comment, so whoever wrote the card, I'll read the comment publicly. It states, more training is needed to better integrate soldiers into community policing. They often can approach their job and the community from a high intensity, high danger perception instead of a more community police position. We'll take two more from online, and then I'll turn it back over to the co-chairs. Jim?
From the National Association of School Resource Officers, trained SROs along with community policing-centric patrol force, de-escalation training combined with body cameras is the solution. Next comment from Twitter, I haven't heard anything about the new threats, ISIS, etc., and upgrading policing strategies for this purpose in addition.
Thank you, Jim. Madam Chair.
Thank you both, Ron and Jim. At this point, we're going to be turning to our task force members for a very brief, about 2-minute concluding remarks. And I'm going to start down at the end of the row with Cedric Alexander.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Let me just say, I think today for me has been enlightening in the sense that this country, this nation, and those that were present here today had an opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas about where we need to go in terms of enhancing and promoting policing as we continue to move into the 21st century. I think this is on the beginning of our journey to seek those recommendations that we'll forward on to the President. But what is clearly very evident here today to me is that I truly believe that we're on a trajectory to make an attempt to do something very different here. And it has, for me, being able to sit here and to listen and to take part in this has been educational. And in spite of the fact I've been in this profession over 38 years now, I'm still learning more and more every day. The issues that confront us in this country have been long-standing and have a lot of history attached to them. But the moment in the present is where we're going to find the solutions, I truly believe, to the issues that we're all confronted with. And for me, this is not totally just a black or white issue. This is an American issue. It's America's problem. And it's going to take all of us in this room and across this country to find resolve and to seek recommendations and resolutions that I think are going to be important to the advancement of our country. But let me add one other thing. It was just noted by one of the Twitter persons that nothing was spoke to in regards to threats from ISIS and ISIL, and that brings us to an international scope in terms of how do we see this. And when we think about the issues that confronting this country, when I think about it, this is an American issue which we're going to solve, and we cannot allow ourselves to become divided, because we do make ourselves targets for those who want to see us divided and to work against us. So all of us as Americans in this country, regardless of what our history and experiences have been, at the end of the day, no matter how much pain we may have endured and how much we may have put on others, I think we all will come to a conclusion that whatever issues need to be solved, we will do as what we have always done in this country, and that is to solve them ourselves. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this as well.
Jose Lopez.
Echo a lot of the same sentiment. There was a lot of food for thought today, and I think, in conversation with all of the members, but also folks in the audience, folks on the panels, folks that I've been able to talk to in between breaks, I'm eternally grateful for the amount of time, especially for people in this room and folks tuned in, for the amount of time that folks today and over the course of all of our work have committed to this issue. I've done a lot of listening, and I've taken a lot of notes, and I think all of us as members have, and so we have a lot to think about and a lot to talk about. But this is the first of a couple listening sessions, and so we will be moving these around to be able to listen to more and more folks. And so I encourage everyone who's here and folks listening to continue to share their stories and to make that public, to submit testimonies, and to talk to us about not only the day-to-day experiences that folks are facing with police officers on the ground, and some of the consequences of that interaction, but also to provide recommendations and to be able to take those recommendations and put those in the order in which you see fit. One of the hardest conversations, I think, for us over the course of the coming weeks will be how do we prioritize everything that has been put forth? And that is obviously not only up to the members who are sitting on this commission, but up to every single one of you when you're putting your testimonies and your documents forward. The one thing I would say is that I hope that we will have a better balance and that we will hear more from young people across our country. I've had the privilege of working with young people between the ages of 13 and 25 over the course of the last 15 years, and understanding the complexities of the relationships amongst those young people and police officers on the streets of New York City and Bushwick and Jackson Heights, to be specific, I do understand that there is absolutely a need to make sure that we elevate the platform for young people's stories to be heard. And I think it is those stories that will be able to change the hearts and minds of folks who have turned to this issue as one of the most important issues pressing our country today. So with that being said, I'll pass the mic over to Tracy.
I just want to start my remarks by thanking, for myself personally, all of our witnesses who came here and shared with us their testimony. I really appreciated the fact that they were so clear-eyed and generous and willing to acknowledge the complexity of this issue, but also be also very clear-eyed about recommendations with regard to how we can make progress. I also want to thank all of you for sitting here and supporting the witnesses, supporting us, offering your ideas, whether in this forum, online, or if you're going to be offering ideas subsequent to this session, online, through the website, et cetera. We've only just begun our work. I'm very cognizant of that. I have so much to digest, and we have, I think, at least 4 more full days like this to cover more topics other than trust and legitimacy. I'm very glad that we started with that, because that does seem to be the cornerstone of the work that needs to be done here. And the final thing I want to say on that is I've spent decades of my professional life researching that issue of procedural justice and legitimacy from a social science perspective and from a legal perspective. And the highlight of the day for me was seeing all the ways in which real live stories motivate and make clear and salient that research. So thank you.
Brittany?
So today has been extremely enlightening and informative. I think that one of the greatest things about democracy is our freedom and, truthfully, our responsibility to examine ourselves. And in particular, to truthfully and proactively examine any system that has an impact on our children, especially a life or death impact on our children. I believe that education has a life or death impact on our children, and that's why I became an educator. And when I heard from Kevon, who's a 10th grader in the Jennings School District, which is directly adjacent to Ferguson, and he missed a week and a half of school during those first 3 weeks of the chaos. When I heard him talk about wanting to be a police officer and being enrolled as an African-American young man in a program for people who want to be police officers one day, and leaving the computer lab a few weeks ago and being accosted by a police officer being stopped and frisked while he was walking home, I recognized the same responsibility to truthfully and proactively examine the system that he wants to be a part of, but is also policing him right now. And so I am deeply thankful to be a part of this task force, because it is clear that we are not about platitudes, but about the real work. There is clearly a great deal of work to do, but the witnesses and all of you have and will continue to enable us to do that. I'm in particular thankful for all of the perspectives that are unlike mine that I heard today, perspectives like Lieutenant Peralta's and Mr. Ray and Raymond, as folks involved in law enforcement, which is a profession that I am not involved in, but who had very thoughtful and proactive suggestions for how we can move forward. Those are the things that I'll really be turning over in my head tonight, because we want to make sure that this is not an echo chamber, but a truly diverse compilation of ideas and thoughts. So thank you for all that folks have contributed, and I'm looking forward to getting the real work done.
Excellent. Sue Brower?
Thank you. Well, I have to thank the co-chairs again for giving me this opportunity, and the president. It's been an amazing day. I've been in law enforcement for 35 years, and I heard things today that really reawakened some thoughts that I had had. One of the things that was so clear to me is there's so much pain out there, and there's so much frustration. And I think that really resonated today, and I think that's why we're struggling so much, is there's so much pain on the part of mothers who have lost children, and there's pain on the part of police officers who have lost partners and loved ones. So we start from that position of pain, and I think that makes it more difficult to approach this in a clear-headed way. but I think the structure of this panel is going to help us work through that. I also have heard a lot of hope and a lot of good ideas, so I feel a tremendous responsibility not to let you down. There's so many of you who've devoted your lives to this cause, so I feel that sense of responsibility. I know the task force is going to do good work. In addition to that, I am looking forward to taking the insights I've gained even just today to apply it to the next generation of police officers that I'm responsible for training in the state of Washington. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Connie Rice? Connie?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you, Chief Ramsey. The two of you have really led us very, very ably. My biggest thanks, however, go to you for sticking with us and lending witness to this work. I am concerned. I want to hear more from the police because I'm afraid I'm completely missing that perspective. And it would do me good to hear more from the cops about what we're missing. There's enormous pain in the community. I know that pain because I've represented families forever. And I think that we have to start there. But I don't think we're going to end there. I think we can end in a place of hope and a place of moving forward together towards safety and the elimination of these kinds of deaths. I don't want to hear about any more kids being shot by the police. I really don't. It's time for that to end. And it can end if we really, really focus and help our cops train the right way and get the community to back the police. When the police feel backed and they feel safe, when police feel safe, the community doesn't die. That's been my experience. The community does not die when the police are safe and when the police feel supported. So I think it's got to be two ways. It's got to be both ways. So thank everybody for sticking with us. Help us piece this together. And I think we'll come out with a report that you'll be proud of.
Thank you. Sean Smoot.
I would like to just echo my colleagues' comments. I especially want to thank the witnesses who traveled to testify in person today and those who took the time to submit written testimony. To the co-chairs and Director Davis, thank you very much for your leadership today and in the lead up to today. And especially to President Obama, thank you for convening this task force and honoring us by allowing us to serve on it. Thank you to those of you who did attend today in person, and I know that there are literally thousands of people who attended this listening hearing online, and your comments will be summarized for us and provided to us, and so you will be heard as well, even though you maybe couldn't travel here to testify before the task force. Speaking for myself, I certainly learned a lot today and also recognize, as I think my colleagues do as well, that we have a lot more to learn. I really appreciate the solid recommendations that we got today, and I think we've probably been able to identify some areas where we didn't get solid recommendations, and so I would encourage those of you who may have been watching online or on television, if you have one, you can certainly submit one through the COPS webpage. I was really struck, and thank you for your comments, Connie. I don't think we're going to end with hope. Today was the first real day of hearings. I'm starting with hope. I was very struck by the last panel that we heard from, the mayors, which is surprising for anyone who would know me. Not only for recognizing the importance of working together with police officers, their elected representatives, but also elected representatives of the community and community leaders mayors. And to the point, not only was it recognized, it was exemplified today when the mayor of Sacramento actually brought the police union president with him as his companion to the hearing. Very striking, and also I think a great example and a great cause for all of us to have the hope that moving forward together we can make really good progress on reestablishing trust and strengthening trust in communities where we need to, while we continue to do the work of ensuring everyone's safety. So thank you.
Brian Stevenson?
Well, I'd like to just publicly thank the COP staff for getting this really diverse and, I think, thoughtful group of witnesses before us and before the people who are watching this public hearing. I was really impressed and really pleased by the testimony that we heard. I especially appreciated the witnesses who provided us with very specific recommendations, and I just would like to underline the utility of that, because we're on a very short timeline, that when we get very particular specific recommendations, it really does elevate our ability to kind of to advise the President and our nation's leaders on how best to get out of this place of pain and frustration into a place of more hope and health. And I'm very excited about that. I'm very hopeful about that. I think we've had a very productive day. I also want to add my voice of thanks to the people who are here, and particularly these police officers who came, who provide us direct perspectives of their experience. We have several African-American police officers who really said some really insightful, thoughtful, helpful things for me to hear about your experiences in law enforcement, as well as family members who have lost loved ones to police violence. Those perspectives are critically important as we kind of find our way through these really complex and difficult issues. But I'm grateful that everyone's put so much time. I think it was a very engaged day, and that kind of engagement is very energizing to those of us on this task force who want to produce the best recommendations we possibly can. And so I thank you for energizing our work and our time together.
Thank you. And Chief Villasenor.
I'll try and keep my comments short because I know that I'm the last one here, but I've heard a couple of my fellow panel members talk about pain, and I heard the pain in some of the voices that were talking today. And I think that's apropos because as a parent, I know that you can't have growth without pain. And we need to grow as a profession. We need to make sure that we're listening to the pain that's out there and incorporating it into our process changes. But those process changes also need to be based on fact and truth and not merely anecdotal information. We need to look into all the issues. And I heard out there earlier about and it has floored me since this conversation started, that we as a profession don't track all lethal use of force data. When I found that out, that was a shock to me as well. And so there's changes that need to take place, and we need to be responsible as a profession and lead the way on those changes because that's our responsibility. And so I just thank you for taking the time to spend with us today, and I thank you for your input.
Commissioner Ramsey?
Well, let me start by first thanking all of you for being here, especially those of you that have been here all day, because I know it's been a long day, but it's been a very good day. And whether you were here personally or whether you watched on television or online, thank you so much, because your participation is crucial to the work of this task force. We need your participation. We need your thoughts. I've been in policing now for more than 46 years, and I've learned a lot during that period of time, and I learned something today. And I learned something because I had an opportunity to listen to many people from very diverse backgrounds that have different opinions, many opinions that are different from mine. But listening, which is a skill that all of us could probably use a lot more of. Listening, opening up our minds, and re-examining how we think about things is very, very important. The events over the past few months have brought us here today, but it's also the events over the past few months have given us an opportunity to create a better police department across the country, to create better, stronger relationships, to bridge gaps that have gone unattended for far too long. So we need to hear these voices, and as we proceed in this work that the President has given us, we need to continue this dialogue, and you all need to continue to be involved, whether you can attend future meetings or not. There are ways in which you can stay involved, and we encourage you to do so. We had a lot of very specific recommendations. We had people that came with grievances, but even though they came with grievances, they also offered recommendations. I can't tell you how much that means to all of us. Now, we have great staff here. We've all taken copious notes, but they've been recording every single thing. So even information coming in online, we will see it as task force members and be in a position to be able to start prioritizing and start formulating the report that's due to the President. So I look forward to it. I think this is a great opportunity for change, significant change, and I can tell you one thing. On behalf of this task force, none of us would be here today if we did not believe it was possible and if we weren't serious about this work. Status quo is unacceptable, and I think we all realize that, and we will move forward as a result of that. Thank you.
Brittany raised an important point, and that is that in a democracy, we look at the need for change. And thank you, Brittany, for raising that. But one thing we need to reflect on is that that kind of self-examination is really tough. Think about it in your own lives. It's very hard to be self-reflective and to do that in an honest way. Today was tough. It was tough in many of the panels to look at our own institutions and look in criminal justice. And I think for many of us who've been involved in criminal justice for many years, we've seen that that kind of self-examination, as the Commissioner referred to, is very difficult. So today has been a long day, and I also want to join my colleagues in thanking all of you who've been here throughout these many hours and those online who've been joining us over the day. But I think this kind of endeavor is very worthwhile, and this kind of investment in looking hard at very tough issues. So I join my colleagues again in thanking all of you and thanking the COPS office, Ron Davis and his great team, for helping us in going down this road. And with that, Ron, let me turn to you for your final comments.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank everyone for being here. Let me start with something that Brian said. I just want to reinforce and say time and time again, and that is thank you to the COPS office staff for putting this together. Obviously, the President announced this on December 1st. The executive order was signed and the task force members named on December 18th. And here we are today in the second week of January. And I think all that shows the sense of urgency, the priority, the importance of it. So I want to thank my team for the outstanding work that they've done. And just to give you a sense of, for those who have been here most of today, this is the first of 6. There are 5 more listening sessions like this. And so when you think about the robust, the testimonies, the discussions, how much, I just think of my 28 years of law enforcement, now a year at the Department of Justice, how much I learned just today. I'm really excited about the future public sessions and hearings. Brittany mentioned something about this self-evaluation, and I've always had a phrase when we do evaluations, the COPS office does evaluations around the country, and that is the truth hurts, but selective ignorance is fatal. And so those who fail to want to identify what's wrong with them eventually will, or kind of, sense for they're set up for doom. And so we do want to know the truth. We do want people to come forward. It may make us cringe depending on our perspectives, but the truth does hurt, but selective ignorance is fatal. So let me tell you what was coming down the pike. So we had the robust discussion today. The co-chair mentioned that this is all taped. And so what will happen now on January 21st from 5 to 7, and that's Eastern Standard Time, we will have another public hearing, but it will be a teleconference, which is a public hearing open to the public. If you go to the COPS website, and you go to www.cops.usdoj.gov, when you go to the website, there's a President Task Force icon that you can hit, and it brings you right to the site where you can see the call-in number that we'll have that give you the information. That will be January 21st, 5 to 7, and the purpose of that call is the task force will be able to now After digesting it, we will summarize this, distill the recommendations, provide it back to them. They'll have the ability to talk about now what has happened today. Because you can imagine, for those who sat here, there's a lot for these great thinkers to digest. We will also be January 30th and 31st, will be 2 additional public hearings, very similar to what we saw today. It will be in Cincinnati at the University of Cincinnati, and you can go to the website to learn more about those 2 hearings as well. And then we will have hearings in February to complete it, because as if you don't know, the interim report to the president is due March 2nd. And if you could tell by the hearing we had today, the schedule that we have, and by obviously the tenacity of our co-chairs and this task force, we will definitely have a report ready to hand to the President of the United States on March 2nd, one with concrete recommendations on how we as a country together can move forward. So it is a great honor for me to be able to support the task force. My office is very excited about it. I want to thank them again, and then turn it back over to the chairs, and thank you guys for doing that. Let me turn to Jim real quick, if I may, Madam Chair, to make sure there's, I don't want to show my social media ignorance, but do we have hashtags or things like that people can go to?
We do, in terms of, it's hashtag police task force,
okay.
Police task force, to add additional comments. And again, submitting online, all this information will be collected, digested, and given to the task force. Nothing will be left out. So feel free to tweet us. I think that's the right word. And my career accomplishment today is actually reading Twitter announcements. My 19 grandchildren will be impressed. So yeah, those kinds of announcements and online data.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, with that, once again, thank you all for being here, and the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing is now adjourned. Thank you.